421. Chapter 421 of Dark Pestilence. 23rd May, 1995, Hogwarts, Scotland. Harry was sitting at a desk in the room of requirements, with hundreds of pieces of parchment floating around him, each with complicated formulas and calculations. Despite the fact that his new perception of magic made him feel just how fake everything was, the room was still very useful as an impromptu workshop. Calling it the Room of Requirements was technically correct in the way that the room was extremely good at reading one's intentions and adapting to them, but it would have still been far more appropriate to call it the Room of Illusions, because everything was just a mixture of conjurations and fancy illusions, which Harry could easily see through. They didn't have enough substance, for the lack of a better word, to be real, like a world of falsehoods. To be completely honest, most mages would feel weird staying in this place for too long. It would be akin to staying in virtual reality. It just wasn't real. And for someone like Harry, it was doubly obvious. Of course, the Room of Hidden Things was different, as it was just an expanded space where things were stored or thrown away. Nevertheless, this was far more preferable than trying to hole himself in an empty classroom. Preparation time aside, the professors seemed to have been granted a way to track down students, probably copies of the Marauder's map or something. If he had to guess, McGonagall had found the map. Harry wasn't sure who had it before, and made her own copies to make sure that her charges wouldn't be in danger. Either way, Slughorn seemed to have one and kept trying to track down Harry and invite him for tea. Thankfully, they couldn't really find him in the Room of Requirements, and that was more than enough to give Harry enough space to finish his project. Daphne sometimes joined him, but the young wizard knew that magical experimentation really wasn't something she was passionate about. Currently, she has gone to spend time with Tracy, preparing for the Hogsmeade weekend, which is in a couple of days. Apparently, her entire family was coming, and she wanted to introduce them to Blay. There was also the fact that Neville and Hermione kept staring at him whenever he was in public. It was pretty unsettling, all things considered, but to be fair, Harry had been somewhat harsh with them. It wasn't entirely his fault. Trying to blackmail him and threatening Daphne to teach Hermione soul magic was beyond stupid, because Harry definitely had the upper hand in this conversation and could have very easily gotten out of it. If he had to guess, he'd say that Hermione had probably some form of recording or backup plan in case she ended up getting hurt, which was why he ended up negating everything with his final command to her soul. There was also the fact that now that he knew more about the field, soul magic was a deeply personal experience. One couldn't be taught soul magic. At best, they could be taught how to perceive souls in some way, but that would be it. The rest were things that depended on that perception. Everyone saw the world in a unique way, and souls were no different. What people could do with souls depended entirely on them. And honestly, Harry didn't think Hermione would ever get it. She was more like a magical machine than a philosopher, and souls were deeply philosophical in nature. It was why soul magic wasn't really a structured piece of magic, not something that could be really replicated. Two people casting the exact same soul magic-based spell with the exact same power could end up with vastly different results, depending on their perception of others and also themselves. Hermione just didn't have that much insight. If something didn't have a concrete arithmetic formula, she wouldn't have been able to cast it. And so, the Muggleborn had been trying to blackmail him by threatening his girlfriend, while also asking him to teach him something that she couldn't even learn. That's without even the connotations of teaching an unstable and frankly arrogant girl a very dangerous piece of magic. Harry probably should have just explained to her, but he wasn't in a good mood after his conversation with Nimue. Her last words still unsettled him to this day, and so he lashed out. He gave the Muggleborn exactly what she wanted, but took away her choice in the matter. He didn't tell her about what she'd lose because he wanted to see her face as she realized that she had lost what had made her special, that she was back to being a normal Muggleborn once more. He gave her soul an unbreakable command to make sure that she wouldn't try to be clever and attempt to blackmail him once more. This was it. He was done with both her and Neville for the foreseeable future. After all, he had a lot more to worry about, mainly how to actually weaponize the light and dark essences to attack their corresponding opposing powers. It took him a few days of research to realize that both essences were extremely similar and behaved almost exactly the same way. probably because they were designed to assimilate and conquer any dimension they could access. Funnily enough, the essences acted like infections, slowly multiplying using energy, saturating the environment with its presence until it surpassed the original dimension in terms of energy, before very quickly assimilating it violently. The process was very slow at first, as the essences absorbed energy meant for the other dimension, slowly taking in resources until it became the dominant power. Then it would become very fast. The first stage could probably take centuries just to take over a single dimension, but the second would only need seconds. However, there might be some energy wasted depending on how violently they took over. Then, the light's or the dark's will would be more than enough to govern the dimensions, if they were inhabited, of course, or just assimilate it to itself. Calling the essence a disease wasn't exactly correct. It was more akin to a cancer, slowly growing until it reached a critical mass, and things would very quickly go to shit. However, something like that wouldn't really work on the light or the dark. It would probably take hundreds of thousands of years to achieve something like this, and that was without any form of resistance from the light or the dark, and even then, all it would do is make the light and dark fight amongst themselves more directly, which wasn't exactly what Harry wanted or needed. No, what he had was the element of surprise. He needed to be quick. He definitely didn't have thousands of years for some slow-acting plan. Ragnarok was coming, and he needed to be ready, and that answer came when he explored the interactions between the light and the dark essences. Harry wouldn't be lying when saying that the light's and the dark's hatred of one another was built into their very essence. The reaction was explosive. It was probably the result of conflicts between the two. They grew sensitive to their enemy's presence. That had a lot of potential. But what did they sense exactly? Harry was doing his best to properly analyze the essences, specifically what they reacted to. They were so similar that just reacting to the energy itself would just get the essence to attack itself. Solomon's magic was the only reason he'd been able to make heads or tails of it. The magic was breathtakingly efficient. It barely wasted any energy and was made up of more layers and enchantments than the entirety of Hogwarts, while barely using less than a drop of energy. This was, without a doubt, the work of a genius. As similar as the two essences were, there were other differences. Each opposing and defensive enchantment had very small alterations. They were learning from one another with every confrontation, making their essence, their greatest weapon, more powerful with every bout. The deeper he went, the more different things became. He had been at it for a few days now, just trying to understand one layer after another, for both essences, trying to understand what exactly had been targeted. It was extremely draining, even if it was very interesting. He'd have had a lot more fun if he wasn't on a time crunch. He kept doing it again and again until he found it. Right at the bottom, in the core of the marvel of magic, was a source. It was, for the lack of a better word, the will of the essence, the thing that contained its central purpose that the light or the dark gave it. The signature was now very clear, now that Harry isolated it, and now all he needed to see which layers detected the opposing signature. Surprisingly, around a quarter of the layers reacted to specific parts of the signature. Damn, the light and dark really prioritized fighting one another's attacks. With the behavior of the layers of each essence tagged, all Harry had to do was find a way to alter a part of the energy's core enough to trigger a detection signal of a hostile nature. Now that had been very tricky until he realized that changing a very small structure of the core made it feel alien enough to trigger an immune response from the essence itself. The core of each essence was incredibly resilient, but it relied on a strict hierarchy of layered defenses, each one conditioned to differentiate between self and other. By subtly altering a key structural marker, a fundamental component of the essence's signature, Harry could make the light or dark perceive a part of itself as foreign. The trick was precision. If he changed too much, the essence would recognize the modification as internal decay and purge it through natural stabilization mechanisms. Too little, and it wouldn't trigger any response at all. But by targeting the exact signature markers that the opposing essence usually attacked, essentially mimicking an enemy's signature while keeping the rest of the structure intact, he could make the light or dark misidentify its own essence as intruders. He kept altering the essence until he found a perfect combination with a minute amount of energy, if his calculations were correct, of course. However, it necessitated an opposing element to act as a template at first, before propagating. Deciding to take the plunge, he traced a piece of light essence with the tip of his wand, letting it sink into the depths of the essence's heart. And then, like ripples spreading across a still pond, the reaction began. The first tendrils of unraveling magic recoiled, sensing an invader where none should be. The light's defenses, honed over millennia to annihilate the dark, turned inward. Like an Ouroboros swallowing its own tail, it began to devour itself. Protective wards flared, barriers slammed into one another, and the once perfect harmony of magic became discord. Like a symphony playing against itself, each note clashing into chaos before the release of energy wiped both of them out. It worked. Holy shit, it actually worked. No, it was more than that. The energy released by a cell attacking itself was more than enough to be harnessed, to infect other cells. Theoretically, only a simple alchemical array to affect the structure of the core of each essence, to be carried from the start, could turn the surrounding cells into infected ones. The change wouldn't even be that big, just a minor shift, which is why it was so efficient. The initial impact with the Philosopher's Stone and Jörmungandr's Fang for the dark and light respectively would corrupt approximately a realm worth of energy each, with just the magic stored inside each one. The essence itself would signal that there had been some sort of attack, and that would start everything. Each entity would target the infected cells, creating more as they destroy it, releasing more energy, and amplifying the reaction exponentially. In mere minutes, the light and dark would have destroyed themselves. It was elegant. It was beautiful. It was also not going to work. If Grindelwald truly knew about this, then he could technically get the light and dark to change their method of detection and only target the offending object, then work on reversing the damage and not purge it. It was technically the only way to stop this sort of attack. Unluckily for them, Harry had other ideas, which he sadly didn't have time to explore that day since he promised Daphne that he'd join her for an impromptu date on Hogsmeade. They hadn't gone there for a while, and everything would probably be crowded during the weekend since almost every magical family was going to visit their children, having been unable to contact them for months. Still, he had made a lot of progress so far. The first part of the plan was ready, and he could use a break before he did the rest, given that it would be very tricky to pull off. He technically had a weapon ready, but there was also the problem of actually deploying something like this. Dimensional barriers were relatively hard to penetrate normally, but something like the light and dark, who had fought one another for thousands of years, probably would be a lot harder to pull off. Jormungandr's Fang could pull it off, but it would require a lot of energy, specifically energy that he was planning on using for the weapon itself. He'd need to find a way to deal with that, either by breaking a prophecy, which was a hassle in itself, or finding some other way to generate the magical energy required. It always came down to energy, didn't it? Still, the last few days were surprisingly fun. Harry had forgotten how much he enjoyed researching and solving problems. Of course, he'd prefer it if he didn't have to fight dimensional entities and deal with the possible end of the world, but it was still miles better. Still, he could use a nice break, and hanging out with Daphne always relaxed him. As he left the room of requirements, his gut told him that there was something there. Using his arcane hearing allowed him to immediately realize that there were people waiting outside under some form of invisibility spell. Were they hoping to attack him or something? Rolling his eyes, he waved his wand, dispelling the illusion, revealing two dark-skinned girls and a boy with very curly hair, their eyes completely wide in surprise. They looked strangely familiar. One of the girls reacted the first and released a flash of light, hoping to blind him, only for him to negate it with barely any effort. One of the other girls, who looked distinctively older, sent a weak lightning bolt at him, which he absorbed with the Elder Wand, before dispelling a hard light eagle from trying to come at him. It was familiar, very familiar at that. This was Blaze's family magic. He spared against the boy while he used it for centuries, and he quickly recognized it. Enough that he even managed to make a bastardized version of it. He never really mastered it, since he found space and time manipulation to be more interesting, but he could still very easily recognize it. How did the girl have it? Harry knew for a fact that Blaze was the only one left with this magic. It was why there was some pressure for him to return to Italy in the first place. Did they somehow steal it or copy the crest? No, that was unlikely. Harry noticed that the boy was conjuring some runes into thin air and decided that he'd had enough questions. Without even motioning everything, he pinned all three of them to the wall and spoke up. Now, with that out of the way, why don't you tell me what you're doing here? And also how this girl right there is using the Zabini family magic. You're not supposed to be here, are you? Given the panicked looks on their faces, Harry was right that they were up to something very fishy. 422. Chapter 4:22 Inquisitive Outsiders. 23rd May 1995, Hogwarts, Scotland. Without even motioning everything, he pinned all three of them to the wall and spoke up. Now, with that out of the way, why don't you tell me what you're doing here? And also how this girl right there is using the Zabini family magic? You're not supposed to be here, are you? Given the panicked looks on their faces, Harry was right that they were up to something very fishy. Harry stared at his three attackers. Or were they his captives now? Did they even mean to attack him? Standing around under an invisibility spell wasn't really a reassuring thing, but he also knew that only Daphne knew where exactly he was performing his experiments. He always came there discreetly and often used portals or just warped space if anyone was following him, and he always knew when that happened. Were they just trying to use the room but couldn't, since Harry was already inside? It was technically possible, but that still didn't explain how the girl was using Blaze's magic. Now that he had moved past his surprise, he took the time to observe all of the intruders without any issues. They all looked familiar, but he didn't know where he had seen them before. He took a closer at the girl who used Blaze's magic and froze as he made up her features. She was like a clone of Tracy, only a bit more dark-skinned. Now that he looked at the others, the girl who had sent the lightning bolt was obviously more powerful and did look a bit like Angelina, and the boy looked a bit like Neville, except for the hair, which was brown and far curlier. It made sense, didn't it? The magic, the fact that he hadn't seen them before despite being the same age as him. Not that this was very impossible, and now that he thought about it, he slowed down his perception of time and started to analyze their energy for any sort of temporal contamination. He froze as he realized what was seeing. He expected them to be dimensional travelers more than anything, but he could tell that their souls, their very essence, matched perfectly with this universe. That only resulted in a single conclusion, something that he had long thought was impossible. No, something that he had proved arithmetically that it was impossible. Time travel. It couldn't be a form of projection through divination, given how time turners worked. The artifacts relied on the properties of what the Department of Mysteries called time sand. It had a very peculiar property of affecting the user before using it, as if each grain of sand could divine perfectly how it would be used before being consumed. This got the person in the past to create a projection of themselves and act, but the side effect was that the magic needed to be similar from that point in time, giving the user the memories of the projection when used. It was why going back too much caused some form of psychosis, especially if there had been a traumatic experience in perception in the interval. The change in the perception of the world just destabilized the consciousness, causing the wizard to turn mad. That was beside the point. What was important was that time-turners, no matter how experimental or powerful they could ever be, needed the person in question to cast the projection, which these intruders obviously couldn't, given the fact that they hadn't even been born yet. That just left genuine time travel. How was that possible? Time could be looped, stretched, or contracted, but this would have literally broken the entire dimension. Did any of them figure it out? Given their age, it was very unlikely. It might be an arrogant thing to say, but understanding, truly understanding, concepts like space and time was something that people would need lifetimes to do. Harry's case was unique, and he didn't even think he'd ever be able to go back in time. He needed to understand how that was possible. Harry gave them a pointed look. Let me rephrase that. How about you tell me what 3 time-traveling teenagers are doing in this school? Yes, he was definitely right, given the fact that his 3 attackers stopped thrashing, watching in with their eyes wide, gaping. The girl who looked like Angelina spoke up first. Time travel? Is that even possible? Yes, it is. You don't belong here, and by here I mean this timeline. It's very obvious that you're using magic that you shouldn't be able to know, and I'd recognize that family crest anywhere. Also, your clothes are a bit modern. It's hard to see because of the robes, but these shoes haven't been released yet. They're a Muggle brand that I recognize. I could also mention the fact that I could detect the way time is being shifted with every move you make, so why don't you save us all some time and just say what you're doing here? They stayed in silence for what seemed like a good minute, processing Harry's rant, before Tracy's daughter spoke up while staring at him in disbelief. "Who are you?" "Harry Potter, at your service," he answered while bowing mockingly. He was about to ask them their names, only for the three of them to stare at him in awe and disbelief. The boy spoke up. "Are you serious?" That freaked Harry out a bit. "Yes, I think I'm serious about my own name." Angelina's daughter, who had been the leader of their little group and obviously the more serious one, spoke up. "You're the Harry Potter? You?" "Oi, I think I know my own name, thank you." "You're Harry Potter, the slayer of the world serpent, the hero of Hogsmeade, the destroyer of Avalon, the bane of the Olympians, the lord of space and time, the last Peveril, the master of death, the raven of—" Harry felt something try to warn him. It wasn't something that he could put into words, more like an instinct that he shouldn't let her continue, as it would have some very severe consequences. He raised his hand and silenced her. Now, there's no need to spoil anything, do we? But what was that about the hero of Hogsmeade? Didn't you single-handedly save the village of Hogsmeade from a Death Eater attack, capturing the infamous Fenrir Greyback and his pack, destroying the last werewolf in history? "Oh yeah, but it wasn't just me. Daphne, Blaze and Tracy were with me when we did it. It wasn't exactly that impressive. I'm also not sure about the last werewolf thing. Greyback's been dead for over a year, and there are still werewolves around. Sure, not a lot of them are in Europe because the Red Witch turned them into lichens, but that didn't mean that they disappeared." Tracy's daughter was practically swooning. "You seriously did all that? No wonder you figured us out so quickly. You're the bloody lord of space and time. I'm going to tell everyone I met you when we get back." "Look, that's nice and all, but you still haven't introduced yourselves to me." Angelina's daughter looked away, a bit embarrassed. "Sorry about that. I'm Catherine Marinakis. The idiot here is Julia Zabini, and the nerd is Alexander Granger." Harry nodded, already seeing the similarities with their parents. Alexander probably took the name Granger after Neville's disownment from the Longbottom family became known publicly. Still, it was weird that his friend's kids looked at him in awe, as if they were seeing Merlin and Morgana in the flesh. Sure, Harry would admit that he accomplished much in his life, but they looked at him like a historical figure, not an uncle or a family friend. There could be a lot of explanations for this, but Harry couldn't help but be curious as to what his future holds. However, every time he even entertained the idea to ask, he felt a shiver go up his spine, with something warning him to not push. But one thing was for certain, Harry was glad to see that the world still seemed fine after a few decades. It meant that the worst didn't happen and that the material realm wouldn't unravel in the events of Ragnarok. Whether the light and dark were destroyed, or if his plan worked, was still in the air. Harry could end up refusing to allow Ragnarok to happen and get himself stuck as Mordred was. That wasn't an option he particularly liked to think about, even if it was viable and preferable to total annihilation. Instead of trying to figure out what would happen to the future, he decided to focus on the present. "Well, Catherine, Julia, Alexander, it's nice to meet you all, but I have to ask why you decided to break the laws of space and time and come to this place. What are you trying to accomplish? Or more accurately, what are you trying to undo?" This time, it was Alexander Granger who seemed the most embarrassed. "We didn't exactly mean to come this far. We just wanted to get back a few years, but we overshot it." "By over 2 decades, one of the girls murmured before punching his shoulder. "I told you that this was a terrible idea." The boy protested. "It was a perfectly valid idea. Mum was one of the people who studied the world tree the most. She could have helped us save it from those nutjobs." Wait, was Hermione dead in the future? It had to be relatively far, not that he was particularly bothered about it. She would have been in her 30s, given the boy's age and his injuries, and Harry was more concerned with Ragnarok than the girl who tried to blackmail him, dying because of some vague event. From the sound of the boy's anger near the end, these nut jobs were the ones who had killed her anyway, and that probably had nothing to do with him. However, it was the detail about the world tree that got Harry's interest. Did he mean Yggdrasil, the world tree in Norse mythology? Harry wouldn't say that he knew everything about dimensional magic, but he knew that they weren't exactly structured in some form of eldritch multiversal tree. Catherine Marinakis glared at the boy. Good for you. You wanted to see your mother again. Too bad we're now stuck here until we fix that useless trinket of yours. Julia Zabini proposed, well, we have Harry Potter with us. He could help us get home, huh? Maybe he'll even help us save the world tree. What world tree are you talking about? Harry questioned. You know, the world tree, the greatest marvel in the history of the magical world, the protector of all mages. The Marinakis girl glared at her. It still hasn't even appeared yet. You really need to focus on your history of magic lessons better. It's not my fault it's so boring. I suppose it's a bit of a stretch for him to help us on that front. But he still should be able to fix that fancy time-turner of yours. A time-turner? Given the fact that they attributed their time travel to a fucking time-turner of all things, these three barely had any understanding of temporal magic. Feeling curious about the artifact in question, he spoke up. Just show me the damn thing and I'll see what I can do. For some reason, they all stared at Harry, speechless, before the Zabini girl grinned widely. You're really shattering my expectations of you, man. Harry rolled his eyes. What expectations? Did you expect me to give you some long lesson about the dangers of messing with time? Well, yeah, the girl answered. Oh, don't worry. If you end up messing up or doing something that threatens the very fabric of time, then I'll kill you all myself. There won't be any lessons, Harry casually warned them. All three of them froze in their tracks, shivering at his cold tone before nodding stiffly. Harry wasn't really joking, though. Every breath these three kids took ended up sending shivers down Harry's spine like a disaster waiting to happen. He was tempted to just kill them and be done with it. But his warnings also triggered whenever he thought about it seriously. Deciding to get a move on, he put a fake smile on his face. With all of that out of the way, why don't you show me that time-turner of yours? The Granger boy slowly walked towards him and gave him a semi-transparent golden pyramid with an hourglass inside it. He could see thousands of runes connected into a very fancy matrix. It was far more powerful than any time-turner he had ever seen, but not in a good way. It ignored the impact of its use on a person's psyche and just channeled more time sand just for the sake of it. It was definitely not meant for human use, able to get someone to project themselves further back in time, but they would die almost instantly. Theoretically, it could have gotten an object to project itself back, like leaving messages, copies, and certain things. It was definitely useful, given that one did not try to alter the past, but use it to benefit them in the present. It wouldn't be an artifact, since the projection would fade on the day they appeared, but messages could work, or even ways to scry secure past events, leaving a recording device in the past to record events and be able to analyze them in the present. However, something was for certain. These kids should have died using this artifact. As sad as it might have been, this was by far the most likely outcome. Them being here in the past meant a single thing. Something had arranged to let them through. Something was risking damaging the fabric of time, something powerful enough to make that happen just for him to meet them, if that was even the purpose. He didn't like it. He definitely didn't trust them one bit, but he couldn't exactly afford to not keep an eye on them until he found a way to send them home. That boy, Alexander Granger, worried him given his track in reckless behavior. Harry quickly conjured his dove Patronus and sent it to Daphne. Sorry, Daph. I can't make it tonight. Something came up. I'll talk to you later. It was probably a bit brusque, but Daphne would understand that something really serious had come up. After all, the fabric of time was a bit more of a priority than a date. What a kind world it would have been if that hadn't been the case. He turned towards the three children who were watching him with obvious awe in their eyes. All right, I have a good idea about what happened. So let's start with a few ground rules while you're here. You will not interact with anyone. You will not try to stop anything from happening in the future. You will also not say anything to anyone about your future. Believe me, you will not like the consequences. Am I clear? They all nodded briskly. Good. Now I need you to tell me everything. 423, Chapter 4, 23, The Time Lord. 23rd May, 1995, Hogwarts, Scotland. All right, I have a good idea about what happened, so let's start with a few ground rules while you're here. You will not interact with anyone. You will not try to stop anything from happening in the future. You will also not say anything to anyone about your future. Believe me, you will not like the consequences. Am I clear? They all nodded briskly. Good. Now I need you to tell me everything. The 3 time-stranded kids looked at him hesitatingly, and Harry rolled his eyes in frustration. What could they have possibly been so cagey about? Oh right, he did technically just threaten them to make sure they wouldn't screw something up too much and kill them all by destroying the fabric of time itself. The fact that they had genuinely time-traveled meant that they were still part of the timeline they came from, and as fascinating as this was, it also caused a lot of potential damage to the passage of time. And so he reassured them, "Look, I can tell when you're about to say something damaging, and I'll warn you. My threat remains if you don't stop when I tell you to." "How can you possibly know that?" Alexander Granger asked, confused. "Just saying something here would change a future. Our future." Harry rolled his eyes. "You're thinking of time as a strict progression of cause to effect, but that's not quite accurate." "What is it then?" the boy asked, with hope in his eyes. "Well, from a non-linear, non-subjective viewpoint, it's more like a big ball of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff. Actually, it's not much of a ball at all. Forget the ball entirely." The 3 time-stranded teenagers gave him very dry looks, as if struggling to believe that Harry was saying something like that. Oh, that made it a lot clearer. Harry grinned. "I always wanted to say this. Anyway, time isn't as rigid as you'd think, but it can be surprisingly stubborn when dealing with fixed points, or more accurately, fixed events. Branches of the same timeline could technically exist at once, but only if their fixed events are the same. The dangerous part is the fact that the number of fixed events from your perspective is everything that occurred that you know of, which is immense. You can't change what has already happened to you. Even when using a normal time turner, you create a projection of yourself at that time, and you can't change the past because it already happened. Anyway, my point is that you can essentially make small changes in history as long as it doesn't happen to anything that would change your lives up until this point." The 3 children just gaped at him, and the Davis girl spoke up. "Did you guys get any of that?" Harry rolled his eyes. "You know what? That's not important. The gist of it is that you can answer my questions as long as you stop when I tell you. So, what's the World Tree, and why do you need to save it?" The 3 of them gave each other looks before nodding, with the Marinaki's girl speaking up. "The World Tree, also known as the Tree of Life, is the single greatest piece of magic the world has ever seen, and likely will ever see. It came out of nowhere, which is insane given the fact that it's almost as big as a mountain, and it appeared in the middle of Britain. There were wards surrounding it, protecting it, which a Muggle-born reported to the Ministry when detecting a very powerful source of magic. And even then, it took the entire Ministry almost a year to break it, revealing a golden glowing tree that radiated magic like nothing the world had ever seen." Harry nodded, motioning to the girl to continue her story. "It didn't seem to do anything harmless, and researchers from all around the world seemed to come, trying to unravel its mystery. It took almost a decade until people figured out what the tree did, and even then, every once in a while, some researcher would find another thing it did and how it worked. It took a Muggle-born obliviator of all things to note a large discrepancy in the number of incidents that broke the statute of secrecy. Despite the fact that Muggle technology was growing rapidly, especially their surveillance methods, the number of incidents decreased over time, practically halting all over the world. Building on that, someone discovered that the World Tree created a veil of some sort, essentially separating the magical and Muggle world while staying in the same place. Muggles and their technology simply couldn't perceive magic even if it was performed before them, even if they were told of it. They refused to accept it, and in exchange, mages needed a lot more energy to affect Muggles directly. We call it the World Tree because it is what maintains the magical world as something completely separate from Muggles. It even seemed to pump more magic into the ley lines, which increased the amount of ambient magic all over the world. It's a sacred symbol for some, with a few civilizations seeing it as some sort of divine sign or whatnot. All in all, we could cast magic like we wanted to, like in the old days. Children could use magic openly, and almost everyone liked that. Harry noted that almost was a very key world, but not everyone, right? It was the same for everything. People would always find a way to complain about anything, and it seemed like Harry's guess was correct given their winces. The Davis girl was the one who continued, "It's really not that simple. The World Tree helped our people a lot, but without wasting any resources maintaining the statute of secrecy, a lot of magical governments decided to truly separate themselves from their Muggle counterparts. They started to take ownership in areas that were already densely magical, and there's been a resurgence of magical nobility all over Europe to maintain these areas. Family crests suddenly became a lot more important, and, well, that sidelined a lot of Muggle-borns. Magical research is on the rise, but the gap between the old families and the rest has never been wider all over the world because of the advantages that they can now take care of. Muggleborns just didn't bring anything to the table anymore, and without the threat of Muggles discovering our affairs, they are, by far, at their weakest." The Granger boy interrupted her. "That's understating things, and you know it. If you didn't have a crest, you were second-class citizens. They've already started to build schools just for Muggleborns, whose numbers have been steadily rising since the sudden increase in ambient magic. Those are the ones that are affected the most. They're separated from their families, who can't even comprehend what they can do due to the World Tree. Can you imagine the idea of fading away from your family's memories with every moment, with the only consolation prize being the privilege of becoming a third-class citizen in a society that actively shuns you? No wonder they're angry." The Marinaki's girl glared at him, and he winced slightly. This was obviously not a new argument between them, and this was definitely not the time to have a political debate. She then quickly took over the conversation. "Anyway, there's been discontent for years, and more than a few attempts at destroying the tree, which the government really didn't like, sentencing the perpetrators to even life in prison, and even executing the leaders of this movement. But one day, someone noticed that the tree started to rot near its root. It wasn't anything drastic, but it was spreading. Everyone blamed the Muggleborns, and let's just say that there could be a war brewing on a global scale. Governments from all over the world have been trying to investigate it, but to no avail. The World Tree was rumored to be indestructible, but someone managed to hurt it. We were all waiting for a war to start out any minutes, and for the government to call for the arrest of all Muggleborns." Alexander interrupted her. "We had to do something. I found a bit of research in my mum's study, and specifically her time turner. Mum was one of the most prominent researchers of the World Tree in the world. If anyone could have figured out what happened, it would have been her. I wanted to show her what happened and then save the World Tree." No, he didn't. Harry could see that very clearly in the boy's eyes. He was still mourning his mother, still. He most likely wanted to save her using the special time tuner, which, to be fair, Harry still didn't know how it worked. Or he could have just wanted an excuse to see her one last time. The last Potter wasn't really in a place to judge him, as long as he didn't try to do something extremely stupid. Instead of prodding the boy, Harry spoke up with something else entirely. "Maybe, but this isn't Hermione's work, it's mine." "My mother," Alexander started, only to be interrupted by Harry. "I have no idea how she got her hand on this, but I can recognize a few of my own styles of magic. The creation of something like this required a way to perceive time that Hermione would never be able to possess, and I mean that with no offense. I can see the parts where someone tried to tinker with how the artifact worked, so that was probably your mother's work." Harry didn't say that it was mostly Solomon's magic, mixed in with his own time manipulation, that sealed the deal. But there were traces of someone blindly trying to manipulate the enchantments, trying to brute force them into also sending living beings to the past, instead of just inanimate objects. It was done badly, very badly even. It was like someone took the Mona Lisa and started to draw over it with crayons. The weird thing was that his future self was obviously left some gaps on purpose in the enchantments. He could have easily made it so tampering with it was impossible, and yet he left it like that, as if hoping that someone would mess with it. Even then, the modifications were completely inefficient, especially given the nature of time sand. And where would it get the power to sustain something like 3 people in the past, while also protecting the timeline from fracturing? The sheer amount of magic needed was beyond mind-boggling. You would need something insanely powerful, a connection to an outer dimension, but that was very hard to pull off. It would have been easier to have a connection with an already very strong, very powerful source of magic. And according to his time-traveling acquaintances, there was one very powerful one that actively separated the magical and muggle worlds. Harry quickly touched one of the runes while getting the pyramid to open up slightly, revealing a small golden sampling that seemed to glow. The world tree in the future was what maintained its presence in his time, doing its best to make sure that the timeline wouldn't fracture. The sheer energy could theoretically weaken something as powerful as the world tree, enough for it to be affected by a curse or something. As he analyzed the constitution of the tree, he had to restrain himself from gasping in realization. It was a marvel of magic that evolved over time, but at a very accelerated rate, growing like a weed, connecting itself to the very planet's magical heartbeat. However, its core enchantments were very familiar, even if it was surrounded by countless improvements over what seemed to be millennia of growth. Of course, it was familiar. He had been the one to make them, not too long ago. Suddenly, everything clicked. His future self must have already experienced this. Assuming that something didn't go drastically out of control and that the timeline didn't shatter into pieces, then he must have arranged things to occur as he experienced it in his own personal timeline. He now had a hint as to what he had to do, but he felt like there was something missing with the children, something more. Ah, right. He needed to fix their own world tree to prevent a war or even possibly genocide. The last Potter took a deep breath and spoke up. All right, I think I have an idea about what happened, but now let's talk about what you've been planning to do. For what exactly? One of the girls answered. Harry gave her an incredulous look. To save the world tree. You must have come here with a plan of some sort, even if it was somewhat shot. Alexander Granger scowled. It was supposed to be simple. Travel back, find my mother, show her a sample I managed to buy from Nocturne Alley with the rotten roots of the tree, get her research, and go home. It's not my fault that these two interrupted me in the middle of my ritual and messed everything up. And you didn't think for a second that messing with time travel might be a bit more complicated than that? Harry deadpanned. The boy looked like he wanted to protest, only for Harry to raise his hand and exhale through his nose. All right, here's what's going to happen. First, you're going to give me that sample you were planning to give to your mother. Second, I'm going to figure out what's causing the rot. And third, he paused, meeting each of their eyes in turn, I'm going to find a way to get you all home before you kill us all in your recklessness, and you better hope that I never see you again. Because believe me, I'm really close to snapping. The boy looked both angry and ashamed and slowly handed Harry a small box surrounded by runes. The last Potter looked at it hesitatingly before opening it. Immediately, he could feel the magic try to infect everything around it and consume it utterly. When he took a closer look, he saw a small grey piece of root that was surrounded by black veins that were circulating around it. Weirdly enough, the branch was resisting the corrupting influence, but Harry had immediately recognized the energy. After all, he'd just seen it just the past couple of weeks. Nidhogg. What the hell was Nidhogg's corruption doing in the future, and how had it infected the world tree? Well, that made things a lot of confusing, but also a lot more complicated. He just knew that this was probably going to spiral out of control. 424, Chapter 4. 24. The Art of Escape. 23rd May 1995, Hogwarts, Scotland. What the hell was Nidhogg's corruption doing in the future, and how had it infected the world tree? Well, that made things a lot of confusing, but also a lot more complicated. He just knew that this was probably going to spiral out of control. When Harry had woken up this morning, he had expected a quiet day of research and experimentation, not being forced to deal with 3 idiot teenagers who thought that time travel was the solution to everything. Well, he couldn't really blame the girls, Julia and Catherine, as they had no idea what was happening, but the Alexander boy was beyond reckless with his plan. Messing with the fabric of time was generally a bad idea, especially given the fact that he used an experimental device that could have very easily killed him. No, it should have killed him, if not for the fact that he was lucky. Or was he? Now he was dealing with Nidhogg's corruption and 3 time-stranded teenagers with no easy way to send them back to their timeline. He could have theoretically just frozen them in time and left them somewhere. There could be some complications in the long run. Given the fact that the density of ambient magic would be far higher in the future, at least according to the kids, then there was a very real possibility that their bodies would absorb too much magic at once, essentially making them combust from the sudden increase of energy in their circuits. That was pretty needlessly cruel, especially given that he had another way to send them back, specifically the time turner that brought them there in the first place. Harry could theoretically retrofit the time turner to work in reverse despite its initial design, essentially sending the 3 teenagers back the same way they came in. There was an elegance to it, especially since he could see that there was a modularity in how the time turner was enchanted. It was essentially a place to actually slot the enchantment without it interfering with any of the other functionalities. That had to be a nice hint. His future self was so thoughtful. He turned towards the teenagers and spoke up. "Sit here. I'm going to do my best to fix this thing and use it to send you all back." "What about the world tree?" they all asked at once. Harry raised his hand and conjured hundreds of golden runes that started to combine with one another and fold into each other's function, which he managed to do with Solomon's magic, slowly turning it into a web of golden symbols that was barely discernible, so densely connected as if it was a solid ball. Harry then opened his palm, conjuring a white glowing dove, his Patronus, which flew inside the web of interconnected runes and started to glow white. The light solidified like a shell around the runes, turning it into a white metallic ball with doves carved all over it. Harry gave it a once-over, nodded to himself, and threw them the ball that the Marinaki's girl seemed to barely catch, and then treated it like some sort of bomb. "What the hell is that?" "I've seen that sort of magical corruption before. Patronus charms could theoretically keep them at bay. It's a miracle that the corruption is spreading so slowly, believe me. I saw it practically swallow up an entire island and the sea around it, corrupting wildlife and killing everything it could get its hands on in a couple of years. The tree must be fighting it off, but that thing absorbs magic. Just to be safe, I made it so the world tree itself would power this ball and release a very powerful Patronus charm. Given the energy, the effects of the spell might reach half the continent." Harry didn't mention the fact that he made sure that it would destroy any potential breach with Nidhogg's realm, in case some idiot ended up opening one, and that it would essentially remove all signs of the essence from everywhere it touched. The fact that the corruption existed in the first place was far more concerning than fixing the tree. After all, if it could be infected once, it could happen again. Still, the fact that someone was messing with fucking Nidhogg, especially after Harry had just dealt with Ecrisdis, was extremely troubling. He wasn't fighting the light and dark, only for his realm to be devoured by Nidhogg of all things. Hopefully, it was some sort of residual of the corruption that someone used, or maybe coming from an old breach that Harry never found. It would be far more disturbing to think that someone would manage to open a breach in the future. It was a very small possibility, especially without Solomon's grimoire, and the fact that Ecrisdis wasn't the type to let his research lie around, since he hadn't exactly planned on dying, and it wouldn't have made sense to risk someone using his magic against him. Harry's impromptu artifact would deal with any breach and destroy any traces of Nidhogg, but it wouldn't exactly stop someone from opening a new breach if they could. Well, at least it would slow them down, given the energy requirements, but that was it. The 3 teenagers were gaping at Harry, especially Alexander. "How did you do that? You literally made something entirely from runes, and you did that in seconds." The last Potter raised an eyebrow. "Your point being?" He supposed that from an outsider's perspective, what he had just done was very impressive, especially given the fact that it was unplanned. The boy, though, seemed to choke at his response. Thankfully, the Marinaki's girl stopped him. "Alex, this is seriously not the time for this." She then turned towards Harry. "So this should heal the world tree." Harry shrugged. "Pretty much, yeah. Just make sure the tree touches it, and it will take care of the rest." The Zabini girl spoke up this time. "Now what?" "Now I'm going to deal with this thing to get you all home." He didn't even bother hearing their responses and instead started to analyze What had to be one of the endless layers of the time turner? His future self certainly spent some time very carefully designing the enchantments when making this artifact. The efficiency of it all was the way certain sections were very tightly coupled with one another, while some of them were weirdly independent, modular even. It didn't take long for Harry to find a very nice subroutine in one of the enchantments, especially in one of the safeguards in case the journey failed somehow, which would return the user back to their time. Harry had expected to spend hours modifying the thing, but all he had to do was trigger this enchantment, with the three kids touching it, with the time turner being exactly in the same location it was in when it was activated. It seemed like a weird condition since there should have been better ways to handle errors during activations. But it wasn't that big of a deal, really. His future self really was thoughtful when he made that thing, even if that last detail was weirdly inefficient, but that wasn't that big of a deal. Harry smirked slightly and turned towards the teenagers. "All right, I think I got something. Can you tell me where exactly you arrived when you landed here?" "Outside the Black Lake," the Granger boy retorted. "I couldn't do it inside the castle because I thought that someone might come in by accident. Not that it ended up mattering. Dude, the ritual was like a light show in the middle of the night. The entire castle saw you," Julia Zabini answered with a dry voice. "We just happened to be the closest people there. Why the hell did you think that this was a good idea?" The boy groaned. "My mum's instructions were very clear. The artifact needed to be activated outdoors." Harry rolled his eyes. "No, it wasn't." "Then why was it in my mother's note?" Alexander protested. "Look, kid, I don't give a damn about your political aspirations and your frankly idiotic plan to make yourself a hero and save the world. I don't care if you wanted to make this thing a spectacle, for everyone to see you achieve the impossible. But with just a glance, I can understand this artifact better than your mother ever could in decades. So believe me, when I say that the whole thing about it being outside is completely wrong." He was telling the truth. The artifact had nothing to do with being outside. It didn't even really require a ritual to work. Maybe there could be one as a medium to interact with the artifact properly, like putting in the date and time, maybe even a change in location, or certain parameters. Normally, they should have been accessible through certain spells and using the runes as interfaces. Even Hermione should have been able to figure that out. Using rituals and making a spectacle of the whole thing shouldn't have been in her notes. Either the boy had personally made that up, hoping for some publicity, or there was something else going on. Still, Harry didn't exactly care. The moment those three idiots were back to their timeline, he would sleep a lot easier. Of course, the other girls didn't take that lying down, and Marinaki's expression flattened as she stared at the boy accusingly. "Did you seriously try to go back in time to become some sort of hero?" The boy's silence was telling, not denying what she said, which caused her to hit him in the shoulder. "You absolute idiot. Please tell me you weren't involved in actually poisoning the tree." That time, the boy protested. "I swear I had nothing to do with that. I don't even know who did that or even how. I just thought that saving the tree would stop Muggleborns from being prosecuted, and even then, I could use my popularity to promote the idea of granting them more rights, giving them more opportunities, of showing the world the injustice they face every day." The Zabini girl growled, interrupting him. "Save it, Alex. We'll talk about that when we get home." Thankfully, the way down to the castle grounds didn't have any complications other than the girls glaring at Alexander. Harry's privacy charms were more than enough to hide them, and they arrived right outside the Forbidden Forest, with the boy doing his best not to wilt at the looks his companions were giving him. "This is where I conducted the ritual." Harry nodded, feeling the denser magic around this place. He raised his wand. He needed to make sure that the time turner would be in the exact same place it previously was, and he used to start scrying into the past, using time magic to stabilize the picture, to get an exact picture of what happened, and making sure to position the time turner properly. He slowly peered back in time, focusing on the teenagers landing to this time, trying to see the exact position of the time turner, to avoid any sort of complications, only to freeze completely as he saw something in the corner of his eyes. He kept looking at it, again and again, making sure he wasn't mistaken. It was a silhouette, a hooded figure that he saw just for moments before it turned invisible. The last Potter put down his wand and murmured, There was someone else. What? The three-time displaced teenagers asked. There was a fourth person who was sent back in time, he murmured. Without even waiting for their responses, he immediately opened a portal, which swallowed them all, spitting them out in a very familiar location. The three teenagers slowly got up, and the Marinaki's girl spoke up. I know this place. Harry nodded. Of course you do. If what you told me about the world tree is true, then this is where it will grow in the future. I can see it. How could you possibly know that? Because I planted the world tree, of course. Before your infamous divine tree, this was one of the oldest magical places in the world. We called it Stonehenge, and not too long ago, someone tried to rip out every drop of magic from this place. I was able to salvage it before it became too late by planting a seed, something very small which would grow in time, something that would bring this place back to its previous purpose. I never thought it would grow into something like the world tree, but I recognized the magic the moment I saw the sapling that was, for some reason, in the time turner. Julia Zabini gave him an odd look. Then why did you bring us here? Your mother might have researched this time turner, but she's not stupid enough to think that a ritual was an efficient way to control it. Someone wanted to come, hidden in plain sight, essentially use you as a mule for some reason. Someone who changed the coordinates to get you to go back farther than you estimated. Someone who tried to poison the world tree. It was all about the tree, wasn't it? So why don't you reveal yourself and save us all some time? Harry heard a loud clap and turned towards its source. He had been able to detect her in just a second, but was doing his best to buy some time while preparing a little trap, just in case. The figure removed its invisibility, revealing a hooded figure, probably a woman. She lifted it up, and Harry seriously didn't recognize the woman in any way. She seemed like an average middle-aged woman, with blonde hair and brown eyes. It was the sort of person you wouldn't look twice if you saw them on the street. He had no idea who she was, but Alexander obviously did, as he gasped in shock, Aunt Penelope. The woman, Penelope, the boy, a sad smile. Hello, Alexander. I'm sorry you found out this way. She then turned towards Harry, glaring. Harry Potter, you really don't remember me, do you? I suppose I was just another nobody in your grand story. After all, what's just one muggle-born compared to someone like you? My name is Penelope Clearwater, though I doubt you would even recognize it. Penelope Clearwater. Penelope Clearwater. That was familiar. It had to be someone who knew Harry. Given her age, he probably met her in Hogwarts, and she was also a muggle-born. Oh, right, Penelope Clearwater. Wasn't she a muggle-born that Percy Weasley dated or something? A prefect from Ravenclaw, right? Yes, she looked familiar. Ah, right, she fought Daphne in the dueling tournament back in Hogwarts last year. She won, but it was pretty close. She ended up being beaten by Gemma Farley, who ended up becoming Arcturus's assistant, a very coveted job. Harry hadn't heard anything about her since the previous year. She was supposed to have graduated from Hogwarts, probably searching for a job or something. Was this seriously the evil mastermind behind almost destroying the fabric of time? It was underwhelming, to say the least. Seeing the neutrality in his expression, the woman released a bitter chuckle. That's just typical, isn't it? I don't know what I expected from you, Potter. I have to admit that I'm impressed that you managed to track me down, but you are too late. Harry suppressed his eyes from rolling. Well, that was certainly dramatic. He just hoped he'd be done with this quickly. He would technically have enough time to get back to his date with Daphne. He had a feeling that he'd need a drink after the madness that he had been experiencing all day. Who was he kidding? Of course, this would end up spiraling out of control. It always did, after all. 425. Chapter 4. 25. The Dangers of Passion. 23rd May 1995, Hogwarts, Scotland. Seeing the neutrality in his expression, the woman released a bitter chuckle. That's just typical, isn't it? I don't know what I expected from you, Potter. I have to admit that I'm impressed that you managed to track me down, but you are too late. Harry gave the woman an incredulous look as he watched her essentially cackle proudly. Seriously, did she hit her head or something before going back to the past? No one did that. Instead, he decided to humor her. Late for what exactly? That made her freeze before bursting into laughter once more. Is the infamous Harry Potter confused? Well, I think I understand enough. You and Hermione were probably friends, enough for her to tell you about the time turner. After she died, you decided to poison the world tree for some righteous reason. What I don't understand is why you even wanted to get to the past. You obviously altered Hermione's note, made sure that her son would find it, and arranged for you to be present. Probably under an invisibility spell when he performed the ritual. You made sure that he would activate it with a ritual because you wouldn't have to get so close, and you altered the calculations to make him come here and bring you with him without even realizing it. It was why you wanted the ritual to be outside so that you'd be able to escape more easily when the invisibility spell failed, Harry stated with a neutral expression. What I'm confused about is why. Why would you poison the world tree if your plan was to go back in time and destroy it anyway? Which is a very stupid idea, by the way. And I don't understand why you even needed the kid. The woman growled, I wasn't planning on traveling through time. I wished to kill the world tree because it was the right thing to do, because of the injustice and oppression it represented. It's wrong. It's an artificial separation of the human race, and it needs to stop. But the world didn't relish my accomplishment. They didn't try to move on or make peace with our non-magical counterparts. Instead, they captured my kind and were ready to kill them all for the sin of just existing. I had to do something. You do realize that this outcome would have likely caused a war, and maybe even the extinction of wizards and witches, maybe even anything magical. And you seriously thought that it would have been a good idea. Penelope's eyes glowed in madness. At least the world would have been true. At least it would have been free. Harry gave her a sad look. Who did you lose, Penelope? Yeah, he recognized that madness in her eyes, the desperation that she was obviously feeling. It was grief, and she never moved past it. He was right, as she was obviously caught off guard and murmured, sounding coherent for the first time since their interaction began. How? People don't dismiss the idea of genocide unless someone they love is in danger, or they are so consumed with loss, so broken by it, that they wish to see the world burn for everyone to experience the loss they have. I didn't just lose someone, I lost everyone. After Hogwarts, I was lost. I couldn't find a job anywhere. I'm not talking about the ministry, I'm talking about jobs in general. The magical economy was bad enough, and that's without the fact that I'm a muggle-born with no support or connections. Percy had abandoned me completely. I was completely alone. And so I went home. I studied, went to university, and gave up completely on magic. I fell in love with a wonderful man. I started to heal. My gene. But then the world tree happened, then they slowly started to forget me. It wasn't just someone, it was everyone. My family couldn't see me, couldn't even recognize me, my husband. I thought I was imagining things at first, but I quickly realized that they were forgetting all about me. And it didn't take long until I was so alone. I went to the ministry, trying to understand what happened. Hermione was there. She helped me find a job, barely more than a trainee under her as an unspeakable. I was kind to her back when we were still in school, and she remembered that. But it wasn't the same. Nothing was the same. I lost my life, and I deserved to have it back. Harry truly pitied the woman before him. She was a sad, broken thing who simply couldn't move on from her loss, even if that loss was beyond what most people ever experienced. And that's how you worked on the time turner. Yes, it was a project of hers. There were a lot of artifacts you created in the department. They're still trying to decipher half of them. Hermione and I got it working and documented the whole thing, but we had no inclination to use it. Messing with time was a bad idea. Instead, I tried to find something to destroy the cursed tree. I tried thousands of corrupting substances from the Department of Mysteries, and Hermione caught me when I was stealing the toxic substances in the department and knew what I was doing. She was going to rat me out, the bitch. Her own kind. She never understood what I lost. After all, it was the unspeakables that wiped out her family's memories of her, not the world tree. She was going to tell the auras. I had to stop her. You killed her, Harry stated. Then again, he now had a teenager who just realized that his mother had been murdered. With a flick of his wrist, Harry froze the boy's hand, stopping him from killing the woman before him. You bitch! The woman's eyes watered. Somehow the grief, her horror, made her eyes seem crazed. I didn't mean to. I only meant to stun her and wait for her to see my point. But I overpowered it. I sent her flying into one of her experiments. It destabilized and killed her. It wasn't my fault. I took over her job and kept trying to kill the cursed tree. Finally, one of the poisons worked, and our world would finally be free. But the rest of the world just refused to accept that. They refused to try to move on. They hunted down my people, all the Muggleborns all over the world. War was on the horizon. I couldn't accept that. War was on the horizon, and everyone was going to suffer. I realized that I could save everyone by just stopping the tree from being born in the first place. Harry replied to her with a dry tone, "And your plan was to travel back in time." The good thing was that it seemed like Nidhogg's corruption was an isolated incident, and that no maniac tried to summon that fucking thing back to the material realm. Thank fuck. The bad news was the Department of Mysteries shouldn't have had access to it, and even if it did, it would have corrupted everyone around it. After all, the place was filled with magic. Something just didn't make sense. It didn't help that the woman was obviously batshit insane that almost destroyed the very fabric of time with her stunt. She also didn't say anything about why the kids were involved in the first place, but there was something wrong, something that niggled in the back of Harry's mind. Grief obviously turned the woman mad, at least that was Harry's theory, but it somehow made her less crazed. Something just didn't add up. Penelope giggled, more to herself than anything. Yes. It suddenly hit me. I could just save everyone, make the world a better place, if only that bitch Hermione hadn't bound the artifact to her bloodline. I didn't want to involve Alexander, but I had no other choice. All it took were a few words here and there for an idea to sprout in his head and to make sure that he found the time turner with the notes I planted that would get him to perform the ritual the way I wanted. And now here I am with Harry Potter himself, unable to stop me. Soon the world will be better, my people will not be oppressed, not anymore. Not ever. Harry rolled his eyes. Time doesn't work like that, you idiot. These words seemed to stop the crazed look on her face for a fraction of a second, and he continued, hoping to see her reaction and have a better idea about what was really going on. You can't change the past of your own timeline. That's a fact. I can mathematically prove it. You can travel to alternate universes where things are different. You could be part of a timeline, as part of its events. But then the future wouldn't change. If you somehow change your past, that will result in a paradox, where either time itself will unravel, or you'll erase your very existence the moment you arrive in the past. Your best-case scenario is either you fail, you kill everyone in your future, or you just kill everyone that ever existed in this universe. Anyone who has a fragment of understanding of time should know this, don't you? The woman froze, the madness in her eyes receding for a fraction of a second, as she murmured to herself, "I know that." Suddenly she shook her head, and the madness came back with a vengeance. But if my people will suffer, then everyone will suffer with them. She was obviously being manipulated by someone. Perhaps it could be a form of possession. Harry didn't know for sure, but he didn't like some external entity obviously try to nuke the timeline by manipulating a broken woman. But that meant that someone from the other side, someone from the future, was giving her orders. It was either through a time tunnel of some sort, or a form of active possession. Harry was leaning towards the latter. He would have sensed an active form of time manipulation. Instead of answering her, he raised his hand and peered through the woman's soul. It was hidden, like a very intricate golden web that Harry had barely noticed. But now that he was looking for it, it was surprisingly easy to find it. It was surprisingly powerful and very different. It was almost alien in a way. He tugged on that connection a bit and spoke up. "You're not of this world." Penelope's previously enraged expression turned into a very neutral one, and her eyes glowed gold. "You are a perceptive one, Peveril." Harry grinned. "It's a bit of a skill of mine. I was under the impression that outsiders aren't allowed to interact with the material realm. You even bound several of my predecessors as guards and whatnot. Perhaps it is, in your time, but the future is a very different place, isn't it? With no light and dark, there's nothing really stopping you from interfering. But if there wasn't, you wouldn't have done something as desperate as to possess some human woman and get her to travel through time." I wonder how much energy you're wasting keeping the timeline from snapping. All for a tree. I can't help but wonder why. The matters of Asgard are not your concern, the unnatural voice answered. Asgard, huh? Harry hadn't really thought about the gods for a while. Apart from their involvement thousands of years ago, he never really thought of them as something other than very vague and detached entities. So that meant that the person in front of him was an Aesir. Who could it be? Harry peered towards the supposed god's energy, trying to understand its song. It was rigid, for the lack of a better word. The whole song was dedicated towards discipline, towards the ability to see the unseen, to peer beyond what was possible, like a soldier. No, it was more like a guard, a watcher on a wall that could peer through a fraction of infinity. He could feel a name resonate within him, right at the tip of his tongue. You're Heimdall, the watchman of the Aesir. The woman's eyes glowed. Names have power, Peveril. Remember this. The young wizard grinned instead. Fascinating, but I can't help but wonder what Asgard seeks to achieve by meddling like this. The gods left this realm thousands of years ago. I don't think they really have a say on this realm's affairs anymore. Midgard is a realm under Asgard's purview, the god replied as if it were a fact. So, you want to involve yourself in Midgard's affairs, but you can't, can you? The world tree is stopping you. Any sort of magical effect is now completely invisible to muggles, and the non-magical world isn't really part of Midgard, is it? The energy of the world tree protects them, like a gigantic shield. You got your agents to get their hands on Nidhogg's poison, hoping to kill it. But you didn't expect mages to start hunting one another, or the probable war that would happen if the muggles ever found out about magic. You're not here to destroy the world tree. You're here, when it's weak, to give yourself access to the future, manipulating time in a way that doesn't break it. Oh, that's very sneaky and brilliant. Oh, it's a very scummy thing, but it's brilliant nonetheless. My question here is why you didn't see this coming. You Asgardians have meddled with this realm's fate for thousands of years. Ragnarok was your kind's little brainchild after all. You should have been able to see something like this coming a mile away, unless… Your theories are amusing, but are also false. The hidden god spoke up with a faint look of amusement that morphed into irritation with the young wizard's last sentence. Maybe you're right, Harry admitted. He was mostly making stuff up, possible theories, and seeing what stuck. It made him look like an idiot at times, but it surprisingly worked a lot. But I definitely touched a nerve with that last part. It makes sense. This isn't about conquest or influence. This is about information. You don't want to conquer our realm, not when thousands of others exist, which are a lot less troublesome. The world tree is affecting your kind's sight of its future. Humanity is out of your hands, and you can't stand that, the unpredictability of it all. But destroying the world tree should have been enough to grant you what you wished. Unless you lot didn't like what you saw when you arranged for it to be infected, and this is another way to arrange for you to get access while it's still weak. You need the world tree to exist, but under your authority, under the Aesir's control. Oh, that hit a nerve, given the fact that Penelope's golden eyes narrowed and glowed slightly. Do not speak of things you do not understand, child. Harry shrugged. But you didn't say that I'm wrong, did you? And wow, you possessed an insane woman and urged her to travel through time. Talk about looking desperate. Golden energy crackled around Penelope's fingers, distorting the air around her like heat rising from a furnace. The glow in her eyes flared dangerously, her lips curling into a sneer as she raised her hand toward Harry before lowering it. Leave, mortal. This matter does not concern you or the children behind you. This is your last warning. The god dismissed him and pointed his golden hand towards the ground, with dozens of golden runes slowly swirling at them. Harry, using Solomon's magic, destabilized the whole thing, making it fizzle into nothing. We're not done talking, Aesir. I will not have my life's work be undone, with your kind replacing the light and dark in manipulating my people's lives. Then the consequences of your defiance shall fall on your shoulders, mortal, Heimdall replied, his voice resonating, layered atop Penelope's own, before raising his hand and conjuring a ball of energy. The air thickened with ancient power, oppressive and suffocating, pressing against his magic like the weight of an entire pantheon bearing down on him. And yet, beneath the divine fury, beneath the theatrics of power and righteousness, Harry saw it. A flicker of doubt, a hesitation. He hadn't planned for this, not at all. He smirked. "You're bluffing." Heimdall's golden eyes flared in outrage, and he released his first attack. Harry quickly pushed the kids telekinetically behind him and raised a shield which resisted the god's attack. Well, it looked like he was about to fight a god now. He knew that things would go out of control. 4:26, Chapter 4, 26, Divine Intervention. 23rd May 1995, Stonehenge. Heimdall's golden eyes flared in outrage, and he released his first attack. Harry quickly pushed the kids telekinetically behind him and raised a shield which resisted the god's attack. Well, it looked like he was about to fight a god now. He knew that things would go out of control. Harry's shield was able to stop the attack, but the sheer power of it sent him back a few meters. He retaliated by sending a ball of warped space at the god, who somehow dispelled it with just a flick of his hand. Heimdall then waved his hand and conjured a golden sword, leaping towards him at almost blinding speed. The young wizard slowed down his perception of time, hoping that it would give him time to think, yet the god still acted extremely fast. Harry telekinetically sent the kids away and conjured a staff of ice, which he quickly enchanted to be unbreakable. Harry dodged the first attack and parried the second one, which chipped out half of his staff, forcing him to reinforce it. Hoping to buy himself some time, Harry conjured spears of ice, which the possessed Penelope Clearwater dodged with barely any effort. He channeled that resurrection stone into an ice blade that he conjured and used the staff to parry another attack and sneakily try to stab the god in the stomach, while making an illusion that the blade was shorter than it should have been. Heimdall saw completely through the attack and parried it with barely any effort, going on the attack. Harry dodged the first attack and followed with a beam of necrotic energy, which he disguised as a small ball of warped space inside. However, the god conjured a golden shield, which absorbed the impact completely and even repelled the space-based attack that was supposed to have been sneaked in. Penelope's golden eyes glistened in amusement. "Your tricks are amusing, mortal, but they are just tricks. You have a pretty nice trick of your own too, huh? Insight, if I'm not mistaken. You can understand what you see in front of you." Harry grinned as he saw the god freezing in his tracks. It wasn't that hard to figure out. The way Heimdall negated his spells was literally the optimal way to do that, as far as Harry could tell, but they weren't bullshit enough to capitalize on a possible form of battle divination, hence insight. It was a deceptively powerful ability that mirrored a bit Harry's own, which allowed him to interpret magic as music. That little skill had brought him very far and made him a very fearsome opponent. Much like the god before him, his guess seemed to be a correct one as the amusement fled from Heimdall's face, and he spoke up loudly. "I was told that your intelligence was impressive, for a mortal that is. You must know that there is very little you can do to stop me. Sure, you're a god after all, but I can't help but wonder why you're even bothering with this dust ball. Everyone, the light, the dark, gods and demons, all want to influence this place, and I can't help but wonder why that's the case. You'd think you could all have better things to do than deal with us, insignificant mortals." It had been something that niggled in Harry's mind. Humanity shouldn't be that special. The material realm was nothing more than one realm amongst many, but everyone was always so fixated on it. There had to be something there, especially given that Heimdall looked slightly uncomfortable with the question, "Humanity is under Asgard's protection. It is our duty to guide you and pave the path for Midgard's safety." Nah, that's not it. There wouldn't have been any threats if that happened. So what made this a prize? The only thing that's special about it is the fact that it's material in nature, maybe the worship of us mortals. The Olympians used it to nourish themselves for centuries. Nah, you wouldn't really care about it. You're powerful enough not to care about it. But I'm close, aren't I? Oh yes, I am. I can feel it. It's on the tip of my tongue. The same process of empowerment using worship could affect something else, doesn't it? It doesn't have to just empower being. But what could it affect? Not realms, they're too stabilized. Stabilized? That's it, chaos. The material world shapes the chaos between worlds. We don't shape realms, we create realms, and whoever has control over the material realm is a god amongst gods. That is brilliant. That's why you made sure that the light and dark couldn't touch us. That's why everyone wants to have their little slice of Midgard. Well, isn't that neat? Now the question is why Asgard should have that much power. After all, they didn't do shit against the light and dark. The look on Heimdall's face got more serious as Harry's guesses got more accurate. For a god, he had a pretty shitty poker face. Or maybe Penelope was influencing his reactions somehow. He was technically just possessing her body, overwhelming her conscious mind, but taking over her subconscious was a waste of energy. I have entertained this for long enough. You shall be spared, for you have a role to play, and your punishment for defying Asgard will be the fate that awaits you. Harry didn't have enough time to process that response when the god literally ran at him with a much higher speed, ready to impale him, only for Harry to raise his ice staff in response. A small, victorious smile grew on the god's face, probably expecting to win. Right as the two weapons were about to meet, Harry froze his staff in time, turning it into an unbreakable object. The power of a god met the concept of time itself, and that resulted in a gigantic explosion that sent everything flying back. Harry included, but he had expected that. His golden staff was shattered, but so was Heimdall's golden sword. Harry knew firsthand the main weaknesses of insight, and that was either stuff that he didn't understand, or the understanding of something when it was too late. His time magic did help with the latter, but the former was still a danger, which he had to slowly deal with over the years as he learned more and more magic. If his deductions were correct, Heimdall could see everything, but he still had to process it through Penelope's mortal mind. And that was the flaw. No matter how divine, no matter how fast, Heimdall was still bottlenecked by a brain not built to handle the sight of a god. The sheer lag in translating knowledge into action was barely perceptible, but it was there, and Harry could exploit that. Still, what Heimdall said rattled him. What did happen to Harry or Daphne? None of the kids had obviously met him before, and they didn't mention Daphne in any way. It was worrying him a bit, but he had put it on the back of his mind. The less he knew, the more flexible his future was, after all, but the way that Heimdall said it, the way it sounded like a curse, like a punishment, Harry realized that he needed to know. He needed to know what awaited him in the future. He needed to make sure that Daphne would be safe at the very least. Harry got up and saw Heimdall do the same. He was about to attack, demanding that the god elaborate on Harry's future, only for one of the kids to send a stunning charm at the fucking god. The red spell splashed harmlessly on the god's chest, and the entire battle froze as everyone looked at the caster with pure incredulity. Alexander Granger gave them all a sheepish look, barely able to believe that he had actually cast that spell, and Harry rolled his eyes. "This isn't time for this shit, kids." Without saying anything further, Harry opened a portal underneath the time-stranded teenagers, sending them back to a warded room in Hogwarts, before turning back to the god-possessed woman. Now, where were we? Ah, yes. What was that about my fate? The possessed woman let out an ugly laugh. Did you seriously think that anyone would let you be after Ragnarok? It is your purpose, and whether you survive its aftermath or not is not our concern. But it could be. You could ascend amongst us, welcomed as the warrior, the hero that you are, Midgard's savior, but only if you choose your next actions wisely. That thought wasn't exactly new to Harry. Sure, what Heimdall was saying was a non-answer if he heard one, but he couldn't exactly imagine the ICW or any magical government really letting him move around unrestrained. And since they couldn't exactly force him to do anything, they would have learned from Dumbledore's failures, hopefully. It wasn't exactly hard to imagine what they would resort to. That was if he even survived Ragnarok in the first place. This was an empty offer if he heard one, and Harry pointed the Elder Wand at his opponent, who growled, "So be it." Heimdall conjured a spear and threw it at Harry, who dodged it and sent a spatial breach that the god easily countered, their duel beginning anew. Fighting Heimdall was a far more different endeavor than fighting Dumbledore or Grindelwald. And that probably had to do with the fact that the god and Harry surprisingly fought in a very similar way. They both relied on tricks, on an economy of movements, on understanding the attacks going their way and cutting them apart with the precision of a surgeon using a scalpel. They were easily matched, with Harry's only advantage being his processing speed, only to realize that Heimdall must have copied it and created some form of thought acceleration spell to keep up with him. As Heimdall was conjuring a gigantic beam of golden energy, Harry finally saw it, the chink in the god's armor, and that was the woman he was possessing. Harry knew, without a doubt, that he'd have been overwhelmed in seconds had he fought the god in his true form, and that his human form limited him. But that did not really help matters, since Heimdall's most dangerous attribute was his insight. But he could hear it with his arcane hearing. The god's insight had to be done through Penelope Clearwater first, and it was consuming her very being, overwhelming her soul, consuming her. She was very unlikely to survive past this battle, but her soul acted as some sort of buffer for Heimdall to pilot her body. Harry grinned as a plan started to develop in his mind. He quickly warped space in front of him, making him appear right behind Heimdall, who almost impaled him with a golden spear, and negated a small space warp that still sent him back slightly. The young wizard grinned. "You know why you're going to lose." The god sent a beam of golden energy at him, then followed back by turning the entire battlefield to sand that tried to overwhelm Harry, which quickly used a transmutation spell to turn it into dust. The god then dodged a bolt of lightning that Harry sent at him. "You're a mighty god, but your vessel leaves much to be desired. After all, who would be stupid enough to allow herself to be manipulated like this, allow herself to be possessed like this, all for an impossible dream, despite knowing any better?" The god yelled as he managed to get the dust to bind Harry's legs, ready to impale him with his spear, only for his weapon to freeze a millimeter before it struck Harry, the young wizard having created a small veil of infinite space right in front of him, and murmured, "After all, what person would let someone possess them, even after they admitted that they had no plans of destroying the world tree, only manipulate it for their own ends?" Harry's words obviously had an effect on Heimdall. At first, it was something that he could only determine with his arcane hearing. It wasn't much, just the smallest crack. But it was there. Penelope twitched, her golden eyes flickering, as if something inside her was screaming to be heard. This allowed Harry to take advantage of that and conjure an ice sword, which he channeled the power of the resurrection stone into, impaling it into the woman's heart, while murmuring, "I'm sorry." The woman didn't mean much to him, but she had obviously been taken advantage of during a very vulnerable time of her life. Still, she was a murderer and a very reckless woman, but Harry had just killed her for something that was not entirely her doing. He slumped for a moment, thinking that he had won. After all, with Penelope dead, Heimdall should be able to pilot her, only for a pulse of golden energy to send him flying back. Harry groaned as he landed and saw Penelope's eyes glow gold, and golden energy slowly manifest into Norse battle gear, with armor and a far greater sword on the god's forearm. The Aesir laughed mockingly. "Thank you, Peveril, for freeing me from that mortal's shackles." Yeah, he may have miscalculated a bit. Heimdall didn't need Penelope's soul to pilot her body, he needed to use it, because for some reason he wouldn't kill her. But since Harry's attack killed Penelope, the god was free to use her body as he wished, without using her as an intermediary. Damn it, he should have suppressed her soul, not kill her. He should have seen this coming. Alas, it was useless to think of what he should have done. With a flick of Heimdall's wrist, Harry found himself bound with dozens of golden runes, and he knelt down, punching a hole in the ground, grabbing a familiar small ball filled with energy. After all, Harry had made it from the remnants of Stonehenge's energy. The grin on the god's face disappeared as he stared at the realm seed that Harry had built. What is this? Harry realized exactly what the god was witnessing and burst into an incredulous laughter. The god immediately turned towards the bound wizard and yelled, "What did you do, boy?" "Nothing," Harry answered, his grin not abating at the god's fury. "It's just that I didn't make this to exist as the world tree. It was never my design to make something like this, to separate the Muggle world from the magical world. I just created a seed of a realm that would continue what this place was made for in the first place, its purpose, and that was to bless magical kind and protect them in this isle. You cannot alter its purpose because it hasn't even gotten close to becoming the world tree you're so scared of. Your journey here was doomed from the start, Aesir. For some reason, the god's face paled slightly. He was probably still unused to a human body, being an energy-based entity himself, but his tells were surprisingly very easy to read. He was afraid. Why would a god be afraid? Harry was almost afraid to find out. Heimdall's features settled towards determination, and the god glared at Harry. "I will not fail." Golden energy crackled around Heimdall's form, arcs of divine lightning searing the very air around him. The battlefield shattered, reality itself cracked at the seams, and Harry quickly realized that the god was attempting to express himself fully, uncaring of the consequences of his stunt. Did he seriously fear failure that much? Even then, the essence seemed remarkably familiar. With that last thought, everything clicked, and Harry turned towards the god, unflinching at the power being thrown around. No, it was better than that. He was grinning. After all, he had just a very clever idea. 427, Chapter 4. 27, Blooming Garden. 23rd May, 1995, Stonehenge. With that last thought, everything clicked, and Harry turned towards the god, unflinching at the power being thrown around. No, it was better than that. He was grinning. After all, he just had a very clever idea. Harry watched as everything was being destroyed due to Heimdall's madness. The god definitely didn't handle failure easily. He must have realized that what Harry had said was the truth and that there was nothing he could do about it. Still, the mad god was literally breaking reality apart in his grief, and it was only Harry's experience with multidimensional bullshit that allowed him to think clearly about a way to deal with it. He was glad that he sent the kids away. He probably wouldn't have been able to think clearly with his friend's future children being at risk. Lucky for everyone, Harry was very good under pressure. He had to be, or he'd have been dead 1,000 times over. He had a plan, a way to deal with both the god and the entire bullshit going on, and that plan required the realm seed. The very thing that Heimdall happened to be clenching in his arms as he poured his grief and agony into the world. With a sigh, Harry muttered, "I just wanted to go out with Daphne." Was that too much to ask? He shook his head and warped space towards the mad god. The god in question conjured gigantic golden flames, probably hoping to vaporize him, which Harry redirected by manipulating space around him. He ducked as hundreds of golden spears tried to impale him and retaliated by releasing his Ice Age spell, freezing the entire battlefield, but that only lasted for a fraction of a second, after which the god completely negated them and conjured a gigantic golden blade that threw a veritable firestorm at the young wizard. Harry knew that he couldn't exactly stop this attack, and instead sang a realm to existence, a very small one that protected him from the attack, and he dispelled it quickly enough, and released an attack almost instinctively, a song in weapon form, a sonic attack that sheared through everything in front of it, even the god's vessel before him. However, the golden energy remained, slowly converging back into a humanoid form, and the golden lightning tried to attack him once more, only for Harry to redirect it, imbuing it with his crest's necrotic energy and sending it back at the gigantic energy golem. There wasn't anything material, let alone human, remaining of the god's presence, and Harry couldn't help but try to figure out how the god was even present at the moment. He needed something to anchor him. That was a fact for all outside entities, but was his rage, his failure, so great as it compensated even momentarily for the lack of one? It didn't matter. By now the god was almost 100 feet tall, somewhat similar to the Olympians, which he had fought. Harry used his sonic attack once more, which destabilized the god's avatar, and ducked down to retrieve the realm seed, which Heimdall had dropped when Harry erased Penelope's body from existence. Harry ducked, dodging the bolt of golden lightning that almost hit him, and rolled, grabbing the realm seed, but was immediately caught off guard as a gigantic sword came down underneath him. He activated his invisibility cloak, phasing through the attack and conjuring a gigantic blade of ice, which he channeled the resurrection stone into and stabbed it into the golden avatar's gut. The god roared and sent out a pulse of golden energy, which Harry was barely able to dodge by phasing through the attack. Heimdall then sent a beam of golden energy, which Harry grinned and absorbed using the Elder Wand. By the time the god ended his attack, Harry's wand was glowing, and he channeled all that energy into the realm seed, and he impaled the glowing ball into the ground. The moment he did this, everything snapped back into place. Stonehenge reformed, the shattered air sealing itself, and the golden avatar started to glow slightly less before disintegrating. A shade in the shape of Penelope's body appeared, snarling at him. "What did you do?" "Nothing much. I just changed and added a little amendment in the realm seed you so beautifully threw away. I added a small detail that I remember seeing in the sapling of the world tree that the kids showed me. I thought that the command I put in place to absorb large magical releases had evolved or just been warped, but it was too precise. I had meant it to act as a last safeguard from Dumbledore's and Grindelwald's ritual, a way to weaken their last magical release, but it was surprisingly easy to make it target a certain type of energy, specifically your energy." "No!" Heimdall yelled, realizing what Harry had done, trying to conjure his energy only to fizzle away as it left his hand. "There's nothing you can do, not anymore. You were so busy in your little temper tantrum that you didn't see me altering the enchantments. You can't leave. You can't do anything. This little seed will suck your very essence dry, not just from here, but from the future, from where you come from. After all, you were so kind to open a breach in time to your future self just to empower you in your rage. I wonder what it means for a god to die." "Please," the god begged as he slowly realized the truth of what was happening to him. However, Harry wasn't that merciful and just ignored him. "You should have seen this coming. Was it your arrogance? Was it time or fate blinding you? I do not know. The fact remains that what happened here never occurred to you. For all your insight and power, you never once thought that you might have participated in the events of creating the world tree. Your essence is altering the seed, making it flexible, and giving it the insight it needs to protect humanity from everyone, even your kind. The insight to grow, to evolve far faster than it should have been possible, enough to stop gods and demons from interfering with this realm. Such a change in the timeline will have consequences." The young wizard burst into laughter. "I can't believe you still don't get it. There is no change in the timeline. This is what happened, the origin of the world tree. Your decision to come back created the very threat you wish to eradicate. Such is the fate of those who think themselves above the fabric of time. But don't be so sad. A part of you will live on, won't it? After all, I hear that the world tree glows with such a familiar golden color. Child, do you have any idea what you have done, the dangers that you have brought? You cannot simply usurp a god's authority." Harry's grin turned vicious. "I can do whatever the hell I like. You know the stories. You know who I am, what I can do. Have you ever heard of anyone that was able to stop me?" "My people will not take to your actions kindly," Heimdall warned, with slight defeat in his tone. Harry smiled sadly. "But they won't figure out for decades until you fade away in the future. According to you, I'll be too dead to care, won't I? Let's leave this for the next generation, huh?" Finally, Heimdall released a defeated breath. "I just wanted to fulfill my purpose, to serve Asgard, to protect its interest. Our goal was to protect Midgard, and we couldn't do that with our eyes blind. We both know that Midgard's strength would also have benefited Asgard immensely, but even if you are right, that doesn't change that what happened here was necessary. It was always meant to happen. And maybe that was for the best. Sometimes you have to let your kids grow up on their own. You saw it yourself. This realm is protected. And just as you stated, you will not stay here forever. One day, this tree will fail to protect Midgard, and your decision will be your doom." Harry shrugged. "I just have faith that someone else will rise up, another hero to take up the mantle. If I learned something from the past, it would be that humanity has a tendency to produce very remarkable beings when they are needed." Heimdall gave him a sad smile before slowly fading away into golden light, which was absorbed by the seed. Harry looked at its structure, slowly warping, learning, growing. It was a realm seed with the power of a god, but it paled compared to what it could be, what it could achieve. Like every seed, it would need energy and time to grow. Harry slowly planted it in the middle of Stonehenge, sighing in relief as the battle with the god ended. Honestly, if it hadn't been for his madness, Harry would have had a lot of trouble. Then again, Heimdall would have been a lot weaker if he hadn't literally ripped a hole in reality to empower himself. Still, something was missing. The realm seed, no matter how powerful it would become, shouldn't have manifested physically into something like a gigantic tree. It should have just expressed itself with its effect. Harry didn't exactly give it a physical medium to express itself, unless— Harry grinned to himself. Ah, yes, it was his turn now, wasn't it? He took out the small sapling that had been in the Time Turner prototype, a small fragment of the world tree, and planted it right above the realm seed. Harry could feel the seed connect to the sapling, making it grow slightly, creating roots undergrounds that connected to the ley lines right underneath them, as if it was specifically designed to be integrated like this. A question niggled in Harry's mind. Who exactly designed the world tree? Sure, he had his hand in its creation, specifically the world seed, and what he had just done moments prior, but a large portion of the tree's design was completely out of his hand. And yet it obviously had a creator. It was too perfect not to be otherwise. The world tree had no original creator, because he had created it by ensuring its existence in the past. It wasn't designed by some ancient power or divine architect. It existed because it had always existed. The bootstrap paradox. No one had ever designed the world tree. It had simply been a product of its own future existence. Harry laughed, but it wasn't amusement. It was disbelief, resignation, acceptance. He glanced down at the sapling, which now pulsed with golden energy, its roots wrapping around the ley lines beneath Stonehenge like a living circuit. A closed loop. It had always been him, a self-sustaining cycle, the cause and effect wrapped into one seamless moment. Time was a fickle, frustrating bitch. Deciding that it was too troublesome trying to puzzle this out, Harry took a deep breath and surveyed Stonehenge. It didn't even look like it had been home to a fight with a divine being. People will never know what happened here, and he was okay with that. Thankfully, he was done with this mess. No more time loops, no more divine temper tantrums, no more gods trying to meddle with Midgard. He only had to return to Hogwarts, get those kids back to their time before they actually broke something. And hopefully, he'd have enough time to go with Daphne on their date. A small smile tugged at the corner of his lips. He certainly deserved this date. With a flick of his wrist, Harry opened a portal back to Hogwarts, right next to where he had sent the kids. They were all gathered in the warded room, their faces still pale, eyes wide in shock. Clearly, whatever remnants of the battle they had sensed had left an impression on them. The silence stretched for a few long seconds before the Marinaki's girl broke it, her voice careful, almost disbelieving. What happened? Harry simply shrugged, offering them the only answer that mattered. I handled it. Don't worry about it too much. He clapped his hands together, glancing at each of them with an easy grin. Now, I believe it's time to send you all home. 428, Chapter 4, 28, of Future Pasts. 23rd May, 1995, Hogwarts. Harry simply shrugged, offering them the only answer that mattered. I handled it. Don't worry about it too much. He clapped his hands together, glancing at each of them with an easy grin. Now, I believe it's time to send you all home. The three time-stranded teenagers didn't exactly respond to his statement, which made him frown. They just kept gaping at him, for almost a couple of minutes, enough to make Harry uncomfortable. He frowned at their behavior and spoke up. Are you all right? Did something happen when I wasn't here? It was Julia Zabini who broke the silence, looking oddly hesitant as she was about to speak. You fought a god. Harry nodded. I suppose I did. It's a new one, even for me. You don't look like you fought a god. The young wizard rolled his eyes. I'm just that good. The Marinaki's girl seemed to echo her sentiment. You fought a bloody god, and it was right in front of us. Yes, Harry replied slowly, worrying if the girl had hit her head or something. Wasn't the entire matter clear? He didn't see why they'd have so much trouble understanding it. Finally, the Zabini girl let out a very loud screech and started to babble. Oh my God, we just saw Harry Potter fight a god. Oh, Alex, this trip was so worth it. Holy shit, no one is going to believe us. We could sell the memory. I don't think there are official recordings of Harry Potter fights, just some mentions and whatnot. Oh, this is unbelievable. We're going to make so much gold. Weirdly enough, the girl's ramble seemed to shock her friends out of their gaping frozen selves, and the Marinaki's girl rolled her eyes and slapped her friend in the back of her head. We can't sell recordings of the fight, idiot. We'd get arrested in seconds. I don't think the Department of Mysteries will exactly like the fact that a prototype time-turner ended up in the hands of 3 teenagers. The girl pouted, "Fine, but you're paying for my next shopping trip for ruining my dreams of fame and fortune." Alexander raised his hand and protested, "Are we seriously ignoring the fact that he fought a god and all we know about how it ended is that he handled it?" Harry sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "What, did you want a full play-by-play? Because unless you're all secretly publishing an academic paper on how to defeat an Aesir while preventing a temporal catastrophe, I'd rather not get into it. Look, I understand that you did some very impressive things, but this was a god. Aren't they supposed to be extremely powerful?" "Oh, he was very powerful. Much more powerful than me, even," he agreed readily. "Then how aren't you hurt? You fought a superior opponent, one that was older and more experienced than you. How did you even win, let alone not end up with any injuries?" Harry rolled his eyes. "In my life, I've fought a lot of things and people that were stronger than me. There comes a time when you'll realize that raw power isn't everything, when you'll understand that preparations and tactical thinking could overcome any power gap. In this case, I used the fact that Heimdall wasn't used to fighting mortals to my advantage, and used his rage against him to make a trap to defeat him. Never try to overpower a stronger opponent. Instead, you need to find the vulnerabilities, exploit them, and trick them. It's not exactly glamorous, but it's by far the best plan when you're outnumbered or fighting a superior opponent." The boy nodded before asking hesitatingly, "And Aunt Penelope?" Ah, Penelope Clearwater. It was obviously a sore subject for the boy, especially given that she killed his own mother and had betrayed him and used him. Harry had killed her, and looking back, as ruthless as that might have been, and as much as it didn't really help in directly defeating Heimdall, it was necessary. Having taken a faint glimpse of her soul when she died, Harry could tell that Heimdall's influence had broken her completely. She had been lost long before returning to the past. Her grief, her anger, and ultimately her desperation had hollowed her out. Heimdall had simply found a broken vessel and filled it with his purpose. It had only been Heimdall's betrayal of their supposed shared goal that got her to resist, not the idea of Alexander dying, or even the prospect of shattering the very fabric of time. In the end, she was a woman who only cared about her false purpose, and her death was, in many ways, a mercy. Perhaps she would find peace in her next life. He could lie, tell the boy that Penelope Clearwater had simply been a misguided woman, a victim of circumstance. He could also tell the brutal truth, that she had made terrible choices, had allowed herself to be manipulated, and in the end had sealed her own fate. Instead, he settled for something in between. "Penelope Clearwater is dead. She made her choices," Harry finally said. "Some were good, some were bad. Some were hers, some weren't. I don't know if killing your mother was something she was forced to do or not. No one can tell you but her, and she's dead. In the end, she fought for something she believed in, even if it was extremely misguided and built on her hate for the world around her." He held the boy's gaze. "You can mourn her, or you can hate her, but don't let her actions define you, just like her grief defined her. Either way, I will not judge you for it." Alexander swallowed hard, nodding stiffly. I get it." But Harry knew he didn't. Not yet. Maybe not ever, but understanding would come with time, and right now time wasn't a luxury that Harry had. The paradox of the World Tree's creation was what maintained the connection between their two timelines and what stopped them from collapsing. With the paradox essentially resolved and the World Tree planted, the time-stranded teenagers could seriously cause some damage by just existing. Harry really needed to get them back to their times before they accidentally did something that would cause a lot of damage. Still, feeling back for the boy, he threw the spherical runic artifact he'd made just a couple of hours before his fight with Heimdall to heal the World Tree from Nidhogg's corruption. "At least your trip wouldn't be for nothing." "Huh, I forgot about that." he answered with an embarrassed look on his face. Meeting a god would do that, I suppose, Harry said while humming thoughtfully. Nevertheless, this should allow you to heal the world tree. The rest, well, that's up to you. The boy seemed hesitant as he looked at the glowing ball of condensed energy. Aunt Penelope was the one who pushed me to do this. Using it to promote her cause seems wrong. The Zabini girl took his hand, making him turn towards her. Then don't. Let's just say that you found something of your mother's and that she made the sphere before she died. If I tell them that, I'll get blamed for poisoning the tree in the first place. No one knows what that corruption even was. Harry shrugged and just conjured a small pile of parchment out of thin air. This is my research about the poison. It's a bit abridged, but it has the properties of the liquid, which I saw in Azkaban, its effect on life in general, as well as a modified form of the Patronus charm that destroyed it completely, which I did. Tell them that you found this in Hermione's things, recognized the symptoms, and used my spell to banish the corruption away, since it wouldn't have hurt the tree anyway if it didn't work. That parchment is more than enough proof that it's my work, and it should be easy enough to replicate the feat. Are you all right giving me all the credit, knowing that I'm responsible for you fighting a god? Alexander replied. The young wizard rolled his eyes. Believe me, you'd know if I'm mad. And why should I care about some kid's PR stunt that's 2 decades away? It's not like I'll be there to care. The 3 teenagers flinched as he said that, and that was more than enough for Harry to know that he wasn't exactly around in the future. He was tempted to press further, but decided against doing so. Instead, he said, "Now, why don't I finish setting up the time turner for your trip back? Try not to get into trouble in the meantime." And so Harry slowly activated a few runes on the time turner prototype, making sure that there wouldn't be any complications since he took out the sapling of the world tree earlier, and he was right to have done so. It seemed like there was a completely different configuration of runes for the time turner to work without the world tree sapling, even if the artifact had absorbed enough energy to send them back to their time. The sapling acted as a buffer, a natural focus, for the energy, and now he had to make sure that this focus would be done via the runes, which was a bit power-intensive. Right as he was about to call the kids, only to hear them loudly whispering to each other. He heard Alexander's voice speaking up. "You can't be serious. He just saved our asses. It's the least we can do to help him." The Marinakis girl replied heatedly, "The guy threatened to kill us if we messed up with the timeline. Are you really willing to take that risk?" "We can save him," the boy replied heatedly. "How do you even know that he's dead?" "They didn't find a body," the Zabini girl replied cheekily. The other girl answered, and Harry could practically hear her eyes rolling. "Stop it with the conspiracy theories. There is no mystery of Ragnarok. Harry Potter didn't ascend to godhood, didn't go back in time to become Merlin or anything that ridiculous. He's dead and has been dead for a long time." "But Mum said that—" Marinakis didn't let her continue. "Your parents were his friends. Daphne Greengrass was your mother's best friend. Is it any wonder that she refuses to believe that they died? Nothing could have survived what happened, not even Harry Potter." For the first time since he heard their conversation, Harry froze completely. What the hell was going to happen to Daphne? He was about to reveal himself and press them for more details, but he felt the familiar warning in the back of his mind, telling him not to try to press the kids further. Seriously. This was dangerous for the timeline, but fighting a fucking god who literally almost broke reality was completely fine. Alexander spoke up. "It's hard to imagine him dying to anything. I thought the stories were overblown, but did you see him fight that god? It was absolutely insane." Harry felt angry as he felt the whispers urge him to reveal himself and interrupt the conversation. Was it really that dangerous to know what happened to his girlfriend? Would the very fabric of time break because of that small nugget of information? Harry's breath was heavy, his fingers twitching at his sides. He wasn't letting this go. Whatever force was warning him, be it time, fate, or something else entirely, he didn't care. This was Daphne. His Daphne. She wasn't some cosmic variable to be balanced or an event to be accounted for. He had defied fate before, and he would do it again. If something was going to happen to her, he would know. He would stop it. Harry refused to walk away from this. His lips parted, his mind set on demanding answers, but before he could even speak, reality broke. The world around him fractured. The castle shook violently, the stones beneath his feet shuddering as if Hogwarts itself was resisting his choice. Magic, deep and ancient, screamed through the air, unseen forces pressing down on him with enough weight to steal his breath. The very fabric of reality rippled. The torches lining the walls flickered wildly, their flames twisting and stretching as if being pulled into the vortex of instability. The walls of the castle groaned, their very structure bending, warping. The air itself cracked like glass, threads of golden energy splitting apart, fraying at the edges of existence. Time itself was breaking. Harry fell to his knees, clutching his head as waves of nausea rolled over him. His crest burned, searing, branding pain ripping through his very magic, his very being. Harry gritted his teeth, his entire body shaking from the sheer force of existence being rewritten around him. He could feel it unraveling, time and space buckling under his defiance. If he took even a single step forward, the timeline would shatter. Everything would shatter. He had fought gods. He had rewritten history. He had walked through the ruins of time itself and come out unscathed. But this? This wasn't something he could fix. Not without losing everything. His fists clenched, his nails digging into his palms hard enough to draw blood. Then he let go. He forced himself to unclench his jaw, to release the breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "I understand," he whispered hoarsely. The second the words left his lips, everything stopped. The shaking ceased. The torches stilled. The golden fractures in the air stitched themselves back together as if the entire fabric of reality had been holding its breath, waiting for him to make the right decision. The weight pressing down on him lifted, the whispers faded, and Hogwarts stood whole once more. Harry exhaled shakily, still kneeling on the cold stone floor. He didn't move for a long moment, his heartbeat thundering in his ears. His own body felt like it had been through a war. His magic ached, raw and exposed from the backlash. Slowly he pushed himself to his feet and spoke up with a fake casual tone. "I'm done on my side. The time turner is ready. Let's go back to the forest and send you back to your timeline." The three teenagers stiffened immediately, and Marinakis spoke up. "Good, let's get going already." The trip to the Forbidden Forest was very quiet. Harry's mind was completely occupied with thoughts of Daphne, feeling warnings appear with every possible question he could think of that could help him know what happened to her. When they arrived at the place of their entrance to this time, Harry put down the time turner and spoke up. "All right, I want you three to touch the time turner like it was a portkey, and don't let go. Do you understand?" They all nodded, and he continued, "Good." They all knelt and touched the time turner, but Alexander turned towards him and gave him a sad look. It seemed like he wanted to say something, only to smile and say, "Thank you." The last Potter forced a grin into his face and spoke up. "You're very welcome. Goodbye." The moment they all touched the artifact, Harry activated it from a distance, and all three teenagers disappeared in a burst of golden light, leaving the young wizard to his very disturbing thoughts. He felt the warnings completely disappear whenever he wanted to speak to Daphne, and he walked further into the Forbidden Forest. When he felt like he was sufficiently into the forest, he let go of the grief and anxiousness that he felt since he eavesdropped on their conversation. A gigantic pulse of magic obliterated everything around him, plants and magical creatures alike. Thankfully, Harry had stayed near the acromantula nest, so they would be the only casualty. After a minute, Harry gasped slightly, taking a deep breath, seeing the crater around him before opening a portal back to the castle. He felt exhausted and drained, despite the fact that his magic circuits were fine. With a flick of his wand, he conjured his Patronus and spoke up. "I just finished with my thing early. Are you still up for our date?" The silver dove shot off into the night, vanishing into the depths of Hogwarts. He wanted to see Daphne, to hold her, to see if she was all right. Perhaps that would only give him a sliver of comfort from what he just heard. He would not lose Daphne. He would destroy everything that would be in his way, Dumbledore, Grindelwald, even fate and time. That, he swore. 429, Chapter 4. 29, Emerald Futures. 23rd May 1995, Hogwarts. The silver dove shot off into the night, vanishing into the depths of Hogwarts. He wanted to see Daphne, to hold her, to see if she was all right. Perhaps that would only give him a sliver of comfort from what he just heard. He would not lose Daphne. He would destroy everything that would be in his way. Dumbledore, Grindelwald, even fate and time. That, he swore, for the first time since the kids returned to the future, Harry allowed himself to think properly. With the threat of destroying the fabric of time being gone, he recognized that he'd been very rash when pushing the boundaries of what he should have done. He shouldn't have risked something like this, and he knew that the warning he received was to help him, not hurt him. In a way, Harry was glad that he didn't press things, since from his perspective, knowing the future would set it to stone. Right now, he has the flexibility to act according to the parameters he was given. Things didn't look great, but not everything was lost. Given the fact that there were apparently some conspiracy theories about what happened to them, their death wasn't exactly witnessed by anyone. The only fact was that Harry and Daphne weren't there in the future. That was good. Well, it wasn't exactly bad. It gave Harry the flexibility to work something out. Still, now that it had been brought up, Harry realized the sheer danger that Daphne was in because of their relationship. He hadn't really thought about it before. For some reason, he fully assumed that she would be safe, but Dumbledore could have theoretically kidnapped her dozens of times instead of fighting him directly. Maybe it was because the man was completely sure that he could kill Harry easily, that he saw no point in using Daphne against him, but his recent loss would have certainly changed that perspective. That's not to mention that Grindelwald was ruthless enough that he wouldn't have cared either way. Either way, he needed to seriously think about his future and take steps to protect her and her family. Harry's thoughts were interrupted by a Raven Patronus who spoke up in Daphne's voice. "Sure, Tracy and I are almost done on our side. Let's meet in the common room in half an hour." He smiled gently at his girlfriend's response. For a brief moment, the tension coiled within him loosened, and he let himself breathe. Half an hour. That was enough time to collect himself, to force his emotions into something manageable before seeing her. But the undercurrent of unease refused to fade. The knowledge that something happened to them in the future wouldn't leave his mind. It haunted him like a ghost, whispering insidiously that he was running out of time, that every moment they spent together was on borrowed sand in an hourglass already tipped. Harry clenched his fists, exhaling slowly through his nose. Number Daphne was still here. That meant he still had a chance. He took a deep breath, followed by another and then another. Minutes later, he was far calmer. Yes, he needed to think about this rationally. He couldn't be emotional or reckless, not with Daphne's life being at stake. It was so unlike him to act like this. He was always in control and always logical when it came to dealing with crises. When had that changed? If he had to put a date to it, it would be during Olympus's destruction, when Daphne told him that she was dying. The sheer loss he felt, the agony, it broke something in him. He never wanted to feel like this again, and now he desperately was trying to avoid a similar fate. Funnily enough, the fact that he knew more about the future constrained him. If he had a choice, he'd have just fled this entire place, maybe even created a folded realm, like the one Vlad hid in, and just stayed with Daphne there until the storm passed. However, with a confirmation that Ragnarok would occur, that he would be involved in it, hiding was impossible. Fate would find a way to fuck with him, to ensure that the timeline remained intact, and that would most likely end badly for him. And even then, Harry had a plan, a single opportunity to truly destroy the light and dark, and he had to do it. Heimdall confirmed that he would, after all. That left the single possibility of fulfilling the prophecy and then hiding afterwards. But Harry didn't see Daphne separating herself from her family permanently. Maybe they could stay under a disguise, hide in plain sight. It was possible, but not something that either of them would really want to deal with. It still beats dying, though. It was ironic, really, that Harry was so distressed, especially after realizing that he would achieve his greatest ambition. He remembered it being the reason he'd been sorted in Slytherin in the first place. He wanted to be remembered, to not be forgotten when he died, and the kids did know who he was. Better yet, they spoke of him as if he was a legendary figure, and yet Harry couldn't help but not care. It all felt so small before the prospect of Daphne dying. What a fucking joke. Without even noticing, due to being distracted by his thoughts, Harry found himself in the Slytherin common room. The rest of the house was giving him his space, but according to Tracy, it wouldn't stay like that for long. The court of Slytherin seemed to have asked everyone to leave him be, but they seemed to be planning something regarding him. To be completely honest, Harry was a bit desensitized from school politics. They seemed so small in the grand scheme of it all. It all felt so useless, really, like children pretending to be adults with an idealized understanding of power and politics that would end up shattering in the real world. It hadn't taken long for Harry to realize that the court was barely more than a mixture of a school club and a student council than anything serious. Sure, people made connections and friends that could benefit them in the future, but nothing more. It made him sad to see that Tracy and Blaise had chosen something that small as their ambition during the previous year. It just felt so disappointing, given the potential that Harry saw in them. Harry's thoughts were interrupted when he heard Daphne's voice. "Hello, Harry?" He turned and froze. The blonde looked radiant in a very pretty blue sundress that seemed to match her eyes. She was stunning. The soft candlelight of the common room cast a warm glow on her features, accentuating the delicate contrast between her fair skin and the deep sapphire of her dress. The sight of her, so effortlessly beautiful, momentarily stole the breath from his lungs. For a second he forgot everything. Ragnarok, the future, the weight of fate pressing down on his shoulders, none of it mattered. Daphne smiled at him, tilting her head slightly. "Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Harry exhaled a quiet chuckle, shaking his head. "No ghosts. Just you." Her eyes softened, studying him carefully, searching for something beneath his casual exterior. From the slight furrow in her eyebrows, she saw through him. It was terrifying and comforting at the same time. Thankfully, she didn't have time to broach the subject since Tracy cleared her throat. "All right, lovebirds, stop staring at each other and go to your date already." Daphne rolled her eyes but shot Tracy an appreciative glance. "We'll see you later." With a quick farewell, Tracy disappeared up the dormitory stairs, leaving the two of them alone. Harry still hadn't said anything, still hadn't moved, and Daphne raised an eyebrow. "Well? Are you just going to stand there, or are we actually going on this date?" Harry finally snapped out of his trance, offering her a small, genuine smile. "Yeah, let's go." He held out his arm, and she took it without hesitation. They walked, hand in hand, until they arrived at a hidden, deserted part of the castle, and he opened a portal to Hogsmeade. They walked there, and Daphne spoke up first. "I'm glad we did this. We haven't really gone on proper dates. I was pretty disappointed when you cancelled, to be honest." He smirked slightly. "You have no idea what happened. It's been a very eventful day, but I managed to wrap everything quickly enough to be able to come." The blonde hit him in the shoulder. "You can't just say that and not elaborate. What happened?" "Oh, nothing much. Some idiots used some kind of super time-turner to get to the past, hoping to save some tree, and they ended up being manipulated by a woman possessed by a god in the future who wanted to control the tree. I ended up fighting the god, saved the kids, and sent them back to the future." The blonde just stood there, frozen at what he had just said. "What the actual fuck, Harry?" He gave her a goofy grin at that. "Believe it or not, I did have a good excuse for cancelling earlier. I was lucky that I handled everything quickly enough to be able to get back in time." "Explain," the girl uttered with a very intense gaze. Harry chuckled and told her what happened while they walked around Hogsmeade. He didn't say anything about their fates, hoping to keep their date to be relatively light-hearted. Daphne's expression got progressively more incredulous as his tale progressed. By the end, she was openly just gaping at him. It took her a few seconds to process the entire thing before she said, "Let me get this straight. You somehow caught 3 time-traveling teenagers who happened to be the children of Blaise and Tracy, Perseus and Angelina, and Longbottom and Granger. Because Granger's kid decided that it was a good idea to be a hero and save some mythological tree that the Muggleborns were blamed on poisoning. Then it ended up that the whole thing was a plan by Penelope Clearwater, who also happened to be possessed by the Aesir god Heimdall, who was ordered to bring the tree under Asgard's control. You fought the god, and he became insane, and you trapped his divinity inside the tree, creating some weird time paradox, then sent the kids back to their time with a way to save the tree. Harry nodded. That sounds about right. You sent your Patronus 3 hours ago, she screeched. How did you end up getting into so much trouble in so little time? It's a skill, Harry said, pretending to be bragging. I really can't keep my eyes off you without you doing something ridiculously dangerous, can I? He grinned. It's not my fault I get into so much trouble. Daphne let out an exasperated sigh, pinching the bridge of her nose as she muttered, Unbelievable. Harry chuckled. Come on, it's not that bad. I'm here, aren't I? In one piece even. The blonde shot him a sharp look. Not that bad. You fought an actual god, Harry, and you just glossed over it like it was some minor inconvenience. He smirked, clearly enjoying her reaction. Well, when you put it that way. Daphne groaned, dragging a hand down her face. This is why I'm going to have grey hair before I'm 30. Harry froze at that, thinking back to the kid's words. Would Daphne even make it to 30 if she ended up suffering for her relationship with him? The blonde obviously noticed his change in mood, her teasing expression shifting into something more serious. Harry, she asked, her voice softer now, concerned. What is it? For a moment he considered lying, brushing it off, making some excuse about being tired and distracted. He'd done it before, he could do it again. She'd probably know that way lying in seconds, but she wouldn't call him out on it. He loved that about her. Daphne always knew when not to push him and respected his privacy. He was very tempted to just lie, but he couldn't. Not after what happened in Olympus. Daphne had lied about her curse, about her dying, and it had shattered Harry in ways that he never thought it could have. She had known that she was dying and had kept it from him, thinking she was sparing him, protecting him. He had forgiven her for it, but it had hurt. It had mattered. Harry just didn't have it in him to make her suffer as he did. How could he ask her to trust him when he wasn't willing to do the same anyway? And if something was going to happen to her, if they had some horrible fate awaiting them, then she had every right to fight it alongside him. Taking a deep breath, he tightened his grip on her hand. Not here, he murmured, glancing around at the few people still lingering in Hogsmeade. This is a conversation to have somewhere quiet. Daphne's eyes narrowed slightly, probably dreading something that made him feel so serious, but she nodded without question. A few minutes later, they found themselves sitting on a secluded bench near the outskirts of the village. The night was cool, the stars stretching endlessly above them, but Harry barely noticed. His thoughts were a whirlwind, but he forced himself to speak. I heard something today, he began, voice quiet but firm. Something about the future, about us. Daphne tensed beside him. What do you mean? He exhaled slowly. Those kids. I overheard them talking, and they knew about me, but not as someone alive. Her fingers twitched in his grasp. Harry? We're not there, Daphne, he cut in, voice raw. We're gone in their time. And no one knows what happened to us, only that we were involved in Ragnarok, and that we weren't seen since. Daphne gave him a complicated look. But that doesn't have to happen, does it? You always do this, wait until the last moment, when I've almost given up hope, and come up with some bullshit magic to save us from certain doom. Harry shook his head. I don't think I can, not with this. This isn't a fight against a powerful enemy. This isn't something that we can escape. This is a fight against time itself, and we can't run from it. It already knows our actions in the future, and these facts, no matter what we choose to do, will occur. The good news is that no one really knows for sure what happened, so we have enough flexibility to act. But the fact remains that at the end of it all, no matter what choice we make, the world will think that we disappeared. Daphne closed her eyes briefly, inhaling deeply. When she opened them again, they were filled with determination. This isn't my first death sentence, remember? I spent months waiting for my death because of Astoria's curse. This isn't new. I have faith that we will get through this together. At least we have some warning, some time to figure something out, and we'll do that together. Harry nodded, mirroring Daphne's own expression. Yes, the task was almost a month away, and that could give him time to prepare, to figure out a way out of this hellhole. Oh, how he wished the whole time-traveling fiasco never happened. The world tree was nice, and all but knowing that his future was so restricted was more of a curse than a gift. Still, if the world thought it could take Daphne from him, it would learn just how easily it could burn. 430, Chapter 430, Boulder's Edge. 30 May 1995, Hogwarts. Albus Dumbledore returned to Hogwarts alongside the tournament officials. Hogwarts was no longer his, not officially, but in his heart, it always would be. He had shaped it, reforged it, stripped away the dangers of the magical education of old, and made it safe. During his predecessor's tenure, it wasn't exactly uncommon to have a fatality or two every year for some student who performed a reckless experiment or made a minor blunder. It was often Muggleborns or half-bloods that suffered from this, getting desperate to match their classmates who had been lucky enough to be born with a family crest. It was a barbaric time, with some very concerning practices, something that did not align with Albus's ideals of how an ideal world would work. And so Albus had fought tooth and nail to make Britain a safe place, and as he looked at the castle, he knew that he succeeded. Even with him being ousted as the headmaster of Hogwarts, the seed was planted. Generations grew without any magical experimentation, and it was very unlikely that parents would allow their children to be in danger just for some ideals of progressing their legacy, finding the root of magic, or something as ridiculous. Minerva, while doing a very admirable job as headmistress, did not change his policies, not where it mattered, for the simple reason that she could barely remember how things were before he became a headmaster. Albus had discreetly changed the culture of this entire country, generation by generation, with very few old families, ones that held crests, still clinging to their failing legacies. Even then, Voldemort had done a great job at culling them, unknowingly wiping out centuries of dangerous magical knowledge. This was his masterpiece, and Albus had no intention of leaving it to rot, to be perverted into something else by some idiot somewhere down the line. He would return, eventually. But as of now, he had to deal with Ragnarok. The end of days was coming, and Albus couldn't deny it anymore. He had thought that it was either some form of punishment of the dark, a way to torture Gellert for his failure, for being captured instead of dying nobly, or as a plot from his old friend, hoping to string him along, take him off guard once more. Unfortunately, it wasn't either. He could feel it in his bones, the light preparing, hungry for the last fight with its sworn nemesis, ready to burn the world and everything it could get its hand on, just to wipe the dark out of existence. Albus was dreading it immensely. He would only say it in the privacy of his own mind that he was terrified of what might happen to humanity if this conflict got out of control, which it would likely do. The light didn't seem to care either way and refused to guide him for the first time in his life, and it was very unsettling. As much as he appreciated the light and wanted to spread its supremacy, he loved humanity more. His entire life's work was to make the magical world a better place, a utopia where children could grow and experience love and the wonders of magic, as his sister should have. Destroying it was not something he wanted, yet the light was unconcerned. Perhaps an entity as vast as the light had no care for mortal lives, but Albus did. And so, when Gellert proposed creating a ritual, the greatest ritual to ever be made, greater than even the one before the Statute of Secrecy was enacted, wiping out the certainty in Muggles that magic was real just to protect their world. Light and dark would descend, and they would fight, but humanity would be protected, frozen in an instant of time, in another universe, ready to be returned once the fighting ended, unharmed by the powers of entities far beyond their comprehension. Perhaps they would return to ruins, but they would live. They would rise from the ashes, rebuild their homes, and live on under the sovereignty of the victor, be it the light and dark, just as the prophecy of Ragnarok stated. It was an elegant solution that would have saved humanity, magical and muggles alike. It was the only way forward, the only plan that Albus had that didn't involve billions of deaths. Albus sacrificed his very dream, his utopia, for humanity's survival, and they spat on it. They removed him from his home and tried to banish him away, but he wouldn't be deterred. He was the champion of light, a man who held power beyond their comprehension, and he was now back, standing in front of the entrance of the Great Hall, a place that he hoped would survive the end of days. Albus's musings were interrupted by the doors opening, and he walked alongside the ICW delegation, which he had essentially taken over in everything but name, and they walked forward to the applause of the student body. A wave of nostalgia washed before Albus. Had it truly been almost a year since he walked in these walls? It felt longer yet shorter at the same time. His time outside the castle was eventful, to say the least, with one crisis after another. Still, he was glad to see that the student body seemed unharmed, especially after the unfortunate situation with Lily Evans and Voldemort. A few grieved family members perished, of course, but the Evans woman wiped out a lot of families, and with them a lot of dangerous knowledge. He saw no reason to interfere with her foolish quest and was glad that Gellert ended up killing her, even if she had wounded his old friend during the fight. Albus walked to the professor's table, which had been enlarged to fit the coming ICW representatives. He also noticed an additional extra table, probably meant to hold the foreign schools' delegations. It wasn't how he would have done it. He would have probably made each school sit in one of Hogwarts' houses to make the students interact with one another. He sat down, ignoring his former colleague's obvious discomfort at his presence, and surveyed the room, as he had done thousands of times before. He found himself staring as his eyes peered at the student of House Slytherin, specifically when his eyes met Harry Potter's own. Never in 1,000 years would Albus have imagined that a single child, one left to rot in the Muggle world, would rise so high, let alone unravel so many of his carefully laid plans. Looking back, it was completely ridiculous what the boy achieved, and Albus couldn't help but think that it was the very hand of fate rebelling against what they were doing, fighting against their efforts to save humanity from Ragnarok, or perhaps rebelling for the prophecies that they destroyed so long ago. The boy was always in the right place, at the worst possible time, with the exact ridiculous idea to upend everything. It was too precise to be chance. Albus could only see him as fate's hand moving against them. According to Gellert, the boy was the best candidate for Ragnarok's hero, so it made sense that he survived all of their efforts despite the odds being very heavy against him. Fate had shaped Harry Potter to fight them. There was no denying that now. And yet, despite the boy having no choice, Albus loathed him all the same. He had defeated Albus in battle with a stroke of luck that no one should have pulled off. He had figured out a way to win the allegiance of the Elder Wand, Albus's most prized possession, injuring him in the meantime, and escaped with a new army ready to serve him. Albus's hand twitched at the reminder of his injury. He hadn't even been this wounded in the fight with Gellert, which made this all the more ridiculous. Two champions were wounded severely in two different events, where the same boy was involved. Yes, that had fate's meddling all over it. And to make it worse, according to Gellert, he had found a way to attack the light and dark, and forged a weapon that could have killed their patrons, destroying their legacy. Even when he disagreed with the light sometimes, Albus couldn't imagine a world without its reassuring presence, and for the first time, the light had been afraid. The boy had to die. But with fate shielding him, a direct strike was suicide. The final task would be the moment, when fate's grip weakened with a prophecy's death. Speaking of the prophecy, he was still going to need to deal with Voldemort dying. This meant that he would need to find a prophecy that he could reliably break. He hadn't really considered backups, so certain that Voldemort's Horcruxes would sustain him, that he would survive what was coming, that killing the Longbottom boy was surely an easy way to destroy a prophecy, as Riddle would still be alive. Of course, now he was paying for that oversight, and he had to find another prophecy to power their last ritual. He knew of one prophecy that he could break, even if he wanted to leave it as a last resort. It was his backup, his hidden ace in the inevitable fight against Gellert once more. But no, he would look for others first. He'd do some research and try to unearth some other prophecy with enough power for their ritual. Albus's train of thought was interrupted as Minerva stood and began to address the students. Dear students, as most of you know, today marks the arrival of delegations from other European schools for the upcoming tournament, which will take place near the end of the term. While the majority of the official announcements regarding the task will be made once our guests arrive, the ICW wished to speak with you beforehand. She gestured towards the representatives and Albus himself, prompting him to rise and address the hall. I must say, I have dearly missed walking these halls, and it brings me great joy to speak with you all once more. Some of you may recognize me as your former headmaster, others perhaps not. For those unfamiliar, my name is Albus Dumbledore, and today I do not stand before you as an educator, but as a representative tasked with ensuring that this tournament proceeds without danger. In the previous task, this school lost a brilliant student, an incident the ICW is still investigating. Cedric Diggory was not just a gifted wizard in the making. To those who truly knew him, he was a beacon of kindness. His life was cut tragically short, and the world is lesser for it. So let us raise our glasses to honor the wizard he could have been, for his future was stolen far too soon. To Cedric Diggory. A solemn hush fell over the hall as students lifted their goblets and echoed in unison, "To Cedric." Satisfied, Albus continued, "From this tragedy, we have identified critical flaws in the tournament's safety measures, flaws that must be rectified. Such a loss must never happen again, and this tournament will not proceed until we can ensure the safety of everyone in the castle. With the recent unrest in magical Britain, the ICW, with the approval of the Ministry of Magic, has wisely implemented new protections, and I am here to oversee their enforcement. The task will be rigorously tested, every spell meticulously examined, and no contestant will enter the arena without the certainty that they will leave it alive. Every inch of Hogwarts will be searched for dangers, for the possibility of a crisis as it occurred in Greece." His piercing eyes swept across the room, pausing briefly on the Hogwarts champions. Courage and ambition should never come at the cost of a life. That is why we are here, to honor Cedric's memory by ensuring that his fate is never repeated. The tournament will continue, but this time with the vigilance it should have had from the start. The room remained silent for a moment before murmurs spread through the student body. Albus let them process his words, then gave Minerva a small nod before taking his seat once more. He ignored her look of both anger and panic. She understood what he meant with this little speech. He could see a handful of students did as well, given the way they were glaring at him. The Ministry and the ICW have given him leave to essentially do what he wanted in the castle without any protest, as long as there wouldn't be any other crisis like what happened to Mount Olympus. Unfortunately for them, what was coming was far more terrible than that, for the end of days was near, and Albus was the only chance they had at surviving, thriving under the guidance of the forgiving light, illuminating their lives. The only question was which prophecy to break. If none could be found, then he would pull the sword from the stone. It was his last resort, his weapon against Gellert in their eventual fight. His fingers curled slightly against the table, lost in thought as the great hall buzzed with uncertainty. He had time, but not much. The pieces were in motion, and the board was set. There was no time for hesitating. He had one final move before the end began, and he intended to play it well. He would not hesitate, not after what he sacrificed, not after what he lost. For the light would shine eternal, no matter the cost.